Matt and Greg used to interview movie stars, but now they're doing a podcast.
Hey, Greg, do you know what time it is?
What time is it?
It's 12:25. It's also time for another episode of...
LA Confidential?
That's not the name of our show, no.
Oh, how about Matt and Greg used to interview movie stars?
Yeah. Hey. How about that?
Very cool. That was funny. I'm sorry. I'm commenting on Matt's jokes, folks.
So, I'm Matt Levitz.
I'm Greg Trzavosty.
So, today is LA Confidential. We are going to be talking to, or we have talked to, years ago, September 15th, 1997 to be exact, we talked to Danny Devito, director and co-writer Curtis Hanson, Kim Basinger, Guy Pearce, and Russell Crowe. Sadly, Kevin Spacey did not participate in this junket. This was apparently the one day he chose to be hands-off.
Basically, Matt, we have 2.5 hours of interviews with this movie.
We do. This is going to be a long, supersized episode, just like the last one, so we're not going to do junket talk again, but I do have one quick point that I did want to make. In previous episodes, we've talked about how the junket rooms could be really cutthroat, with people shouting each other down and it being really hard to get your questions in. I mean, that's kind of our memory of how it went down a lot of the time. But for the majority of our podcast episodes so far, I think we've been playing more of the sedate tables. Everyone's kind of calm and nice and polite. Well, not so much today. You're finally going to get to hear what we've been telling you about. This junket is pretty chaotic, and you're going to hear what it was like when 3 or 4 people were determined to ask the next question and no one wanted to back down. It was pretty brutal, and I won't lie, it actually felt pretty good to win those battles. You know, it felt like, I guess I am pretty good at my job. I can hold my own with the big boys. Now, Greg, I don't remember you winning too many of those battles, do I? My memory is more of you curled up in the corner in a fetal position.
I hope Matt edits that out, because the answer is yes. The answer is yes, folks. In fact, we are doing this podcast. Matt is elevated to human level. I am now I'm in the corner and Matt
that's
said,
you in the corner, losing your religion.
That's me in the corner. The copyright issue, Matt. I'm curled up in a fetal position because I think, folks, Matt says that's best for the audio. I don't know if that's true. I'm still learning my way through this process. Speaking of the process,
well, the other thing I wanted to say about this junket, I think it's nice that this is a junket table, Greg, that you and I both sat at.
Right.
Because we don't get that in every episode. Sometimes I'm in and you're not, or vice versa,
Yes.
or there have been several where neither of us were there. It came before our time or whatever. Sometimes I think both of us were there, but we were still missing.
Speaking of which, James Ellroy, this movie is based on James Ellroy's novel, LA Confidential. And I have a couple of little side notes before we get into our first talent, Danny Devito.
Yeah.
I interviewed James Ellroy around the time of LA Confidential, the movie coming out, and maybe a couple of years before. And the first thing I met him, this
was a one-on-one?
It was a one-on-one at this swanky area, and that's now closed. It's a different hotel. It was called the St. James Club. We had lunch. And the first thing he did, which actually threw me for a loop, is he actually, before introducing himself to me, he said, he quoted the first several lines of an article I did on the Black Dahlia, word for word, in front of me. And I pulled off a horrible interview because I was just so touched and impressed.
Was it a nice thing you had written or an insult?
No, it was it was actually a well-written couple of sentences that opened up my column.
Okay, so he was complimenting you.
He was complimenting me, and I'm not very good with compliments. But it was, anyways, James Ellroy is a very colorful...
You said that very well, Greg.
Hello? Yeah, I'm a little bit confused. Okay. Anyways, so LA Confidential is a very important film for me. It's one of my all-time favorite films. You didn't know this, Matt, but I have one distinct memory. You and I have seen so many screenings over the years at different studios, different screening rooms. Right. I specifically remember the screening took place at this area called Warner Hollywood Studios on Santa Monica Boulevard. And it's now replaced by a big studio. I don't know, maybe Oprah Studio or whatever. But it was a rundown screening room. And I remember actually having one of my best screening experiences because this movie is such a classic. And just having a high all throughout the screening. Emotional high, cinematic high, not any other kind of high. But I was thinking about this movie all the way home and talking about it as well 30 minutes after the screening ended at the parking lot. But what I'm saying is these type of things really didn't happen with us. Even if we saw,
usually we hated all the movies we saw.
no, what I mean is, even if the movie was good, we would just quickly go home and do our thing. But this,
we would see like 6 movies a week, so
Right.
they didn't always leave an impact.
Yes, and this one really did leave an impact. So I'm glad, Matt, that you chose this for our latest episode.
Well, it's got a lot of great people in it, and starting, of course, with Danny DeVito, who I'm a huge fan of.
Okay.
Going all the way back to Taxi.
Okay.
You know, when I was a kid, I watched every episode of Taxi. I loved that show. Still do.
Still do it. Still holds up, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
So, yeah, and Danny DeVito was a huge part of why that show was so funny. So, yeah, love him from that.
You know, as listeners, if you've never seen LA Confidential, that Elroy piece, Danny DeVito plays Sid Hudgens, the kind of tabloid-y
Yeah.
scooper.
Yeah, it's a period piece. It's, 1950s, I think?
1950s, post-World War II era.
Right. So it's not like the paparazzi today. He's playing a tabloid reporter in the 1950s who's kind of ambulance chaser.
Right, ambulance chaser. And like I said in our previous episode, Hush Hush on the QT was his calling card. That's what he'd always say to get the big scoop, to sign off whenever he did this. But the interview that you're going to hear now just does not talk. It doesn't really just talk about LA Confidential. It also goes into Danny DeVito. If many of you don't know this, new generation, he was also a highly successful producer at the time who'd make really groundbreaking and risky films. And we're going to do a lot of stuff in the postscript here, but he really gets in depth regarding the marketing and the promise of a film called Gattaca.
Another great movie.
Another great movie, which if you didn't live through the time, which Matt and I did, we're so old. Gattaca did not.
If you've never seen it, find it.
If you've never, exactly.
It's really well worth it.
Yeah, so he gets into Gattaca.
If I remember right, it's Andrew Niccol, right, who also wrote The Truman Show?
Yes, very, very good. And so there's a lot of producing stuff. He also talks about different things in this interview. I just want to give a little spoiler. Here's a little nice quotable Danny DeVito. It's just one line. I know you don't like these things.
Yeah.
It's regarding him.
I don't like the spoilers. We're about to hear him say it. Why do we want to hear you say it first?
Oh, that's a good point. You know what? Let's go to the postscript and we'll just talk about that little quote. There's a really cool quote that we're going to get to at the tail end of this interview. Matt, do you have anything left to say about Danny DeVito?
I do. At one point, right in the middle of things, Danny suddenly whispers, 5, she's coming in with her hand, which sounds really weird if you don't understand what he means by that. He's referring to a publicist who must have just walked into the room with 5 fingers up, telling everyone that we have 5 minutes left in the interview. He also talks a little bit about the movie Matilda, which had just come out the year before in 1996.
Yes.
Which he directed. You mentioned him as a producer. He was also a big-time director.
Big-time director, Hoffa. But did you like Matilda as well? That was one of my favorites of the year.
It was all right. I preferred it as a Broadway musical.
Okay.
But I'm a big Tim Minchin fan, so it's more about that, I think. But yeah, some great songs. If you have an opportunity to see the touring production of Matilda, I recommend it. Throw Mama from the Train was a really good Danny DeVito film.
I saw it in the theaters. I saw it in the theaters with a friend.
And War of the Roses, of course.
War of the Roses, yeah.
So, yeah, he's directed quite a bit as well. Nowadays, I think most people know him from the TV show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Which I've seen maybe a couple of episodes.
I've seen a couple as well. But everyone on it's really good, especially him. Yes. Because, as I say, I've been a long-time Danny DeVito fan. Also, he was great in Romancing the Stone.
Oh,
got to throw that in.
Yeah, I love Romancing the Stone. But without further ado, I'm going to say without further ado every single episode. Here is Danny DeVito.
That'll be your catchphrase.
Oh yeah, I don't think anyone wants.
We're
to
going to put it on T-shirts. Greg Strisavosty, without further ado.
I don't know how to spell ado though. That might be interesting. But okay, we have more to say.
In French, it's EU.
Now let's get to Danny DeVito. We'll have more to say about him much later.
Enjoy the interview.
I'm here somewhere. Bunch of actors.
He's found us out.
Okay.
All right, last question.
Okay. We have one more. We have one more minute. We have another minute.
Danny, you played some sleazy characters.
Oh, baby, do I?
But come on, I mean, how could tabloid journalist? Isn't that like sleeping with the enemy?
It's like, isn't that exciting? It's so exciting. Yeah. You know, hey Pam, do you have my far glasses on you? Oh, sorry, am I yelling in your ear? No, you're okay. You just shuddered like when I. What? I don't know what I did with them. Okay. I won't be able to see anybody. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I'm sure you're all here. Yeah, Sid is a terrific role. I was very happy to get the screenplay of L.A. Confidential. The great thing about Curtis's take on it was that we would do it with a gleeful approach, and I think it's the right way. It's a guy who's like really figured out how to make ice cream, and nobody's ever had it, and they want it, and he can offer it up, he can serve it up, and they're really gobbling it up. It's like he feels enthusiastic about getting up every day and going to work, with joy, and he's trying to figure out what stories he's gonna, follow, and he takes the pictures himself, he writes the copy. Probably has the magazine printed. He lays it all out and then takes it to the printer. But so it's very exciting to play this part.
If it's ice cream, you've been the dessert a few times in real life.
Well, I actually, knock on wood. That was metal, but we'll take it. I've been, treated pretty well in terms of all that stuff. I mean, occasionally you're chased, but never as bad as what, is going on. It's this tragedy that happened to us with Princess Di and Dodie and the people in the car, and that's like guerrilla warfare. That's never, that's real invasion. They're really after you and they're running you down like a hunted animal. It's really stalking, really what that amounts to. I mean, I was in the tabloids once. I was I was doing Taxi, and I did I wanted to play the violin for Andy Kaufman's wedding, and Andy was getting married. We did this show called Paper Marriage, and we had him marry a hooker to keep him in the country. And it was Chris Lloyd's first show. And so I said to Ed Weinberger and Jim Brooks and the producers, I said, I'd like to play the violin for Andy's wedding. So I learned it for Going South. I played a song with me and Mary Steenburgen, the Nicholson's movie. And then, so I got the violin out of the mothballs, and I learned how to play something like I Love You Truly or something like that. And then we did the show. Okay, so there was a publicity still of me standing there in my Louis outfit with the violin and the bow, and I was looking at Latka with this like kind of scowl on my face. And that was circulating, I guess, and about a month later, somebody sent of Rhea and I a picture of me in this position out of one of the tabloid, the supermarket things, and it said Danny DeVito gives up desire to be virtuoso violinist to become a television star. Okay, so I said, and it was a big story and the byline was somebody like Rudolfo McGillicuddy or something, and he said that I practiced 4 or 5 hours a day, and that I was aiming for Carnegie Hall all my life, and then I got this job in Taxi, and I gave it all up. And it was really I was such a kick out of it. It was terrific. So we put it on the refrigerator with a magnet, and then about 3 days later, my mother calls up from New Jersey. She says, "Hey, Danny, I didn't know you wanted to play the violin." I said, "Ma, what do you mean?" She said, "You practiced all that time and you gave it up." And I said, "What are you talking about? Did you ever see me with a violin? Didn't I live in your house? What is this?" So, this was like a kind of a treat for everybody involved.
And I don't want to harp on this or stay on
So
this
don't.
too long, but
You don't know, Gail.
on a personal note, was it? I mean, the timing on this when you mentioned the tragedy with the
Yeah,
paparazzi and
it's
so on,
terrible.
the legislation that seems to be going through in the UK right now.
Oh.
Was that like
I think
fingernails on a blackboard to you? I mean,
No, I think, absolutely a absolute tragedy. I suffered the same tragedy you all did, didn't I? With my family looking at this horrifying thing. And person in my, we're all in the limelight. We all want to be part of, you want to be in the news. I mean, that's what we do. I mean, you're an actor, you're a director, you're a producer. You want people to, when people don't want to take your picture, then you get a worry. I mean, then you say, but, to have it turn into this stuff where they chase you down and they it's not only that. I mean, that happened there, but it happens all over. People are with their wives or in their homes, and people sneak into their garden and they put a telephoto lens on and they do all that stuff where you always, guys with babies or families, and people are running them down like, hunted animals. It's a terrible thing. It's tragic, and it's got to be everybody's responsibility. I mean, I think the public, we have to, as people who, look at those magazines, the people who are buying those little rolls of film, if they look at it and there's a shot of somebody, I mean, who doesn't want to see a shot of Pavarotti water skiing? You know what I mean? I would like to see that, So, put that in. But, to hound the guy, and go where he's putting on his trunks, or take shots of him like for the rest of the day while he's getting on the, not that they did this, but I'm just saying this is like a theoretical, fictitious figmentation of my imagination. But the idea is that, when a guy gets, or a woman is an editor of a magazine or whatever, a thing, gets a roll of film and it's got 25 shots on it of somebody being hunted by a camera, and they're trying to get away, that person should say, no, then this is not it. Look what you should do to these people. You're torturing them. You can't do that. That's not the right way to do it. Why, you can't take one good picture? Is that how bad you are as a photographer? You got to take 95 of them and just, claw your way through and like knock their kids over? And what is that? So they shouldn't buy those. They should figure out a way. I'm not saying this is the answer to it, but it's also, something that people have to morally, respond to in some way.
And North Jersey in the 50s, having grown up
Yeah,
there.
I actually grew up in kind of middle Jersey, Asbury Park.
Asbury Park.
Yeah, it's like on the shore, right on the shore, right, like a midway between Atlantic City and New York. Yeah.
See, I'm from Jersey City, so I've got...
So you're like a little north,
Yeah,
yeah.
kind of in the-
So you get the north feeling. You get the,
But
yeah.
where I'm going with this is, there's no shortage of dark goings on in Jersey. So why is it that L.A. is such a great setting for a film?
Well, I mean, everywhere there's dark goings on. Whether it's in Jersey or New York or in L.A. I'm sure you go to Iowa, you're going to find some really twisted people. You know what I mean? It's like not only Iowa, well, every place. I don't mean to, just saying that. I didn't mean to say Iowa because I didn't, I've personally never been to Iowa, but I'd like to visit someday. Anyway, the thing about it is that L.A. in the 50s, I mean, like all this stuff exploding, I mean, with, the corrupt cops, and the film noir is like a really juicy thing. It's a wonderful thing with twisted characters, and everybody's got an ulterior motive, and they're all directed by this kind of duality. There's never, it's never right there in front of you, obvious thing. I mean, and so when I was a kid, like where I would see Confidential magazine was like in a barbershop. You go get a haircut, you're a kid. The first magazine you grab is Esquire because it's got the good babes in it. But then the next magazine that you pick up is, Confidential magazine. There's always somebody, slinking out of a motel with a hat over their face, somebody with handcuffs on, all that kind of like, it's always drug bust or love nest or something. So in the 50s in Los Angeles, well, look at Chinatown. That was an earlier era. Okay, that was really intriguing. That's a film noir. That's a really good one Polanski made with Nicholson. And that's like, greed. I mean, they're diverting water. They're throwing it into the ocean. They're trying to starve the farmers out. They're going to buy up the valley. They're doing all this kind of like trying to control, trying to make hay. You know what I'm saying? In somebody else's sunshine. Did I say that? You heard it here first. On the QT and very hush hush.
Did you watch other films, to prepare for this world?
No. No, I actually prepared for, Curtis Hanson was a really terrific director, had a lot of, ideas about how it was going to be, showed us lots of photographs, mostly dead people, but a lot of photographs of like, and also the time period, so you immerse into that, you saturate yourself with all that stuff, and basically the screenplay, which was very, very well written and wonderfully constructed, James Ellroy's novel, which is like absolutely brilliant, one of the greatest novels ever written. He gave me $20 to say that. But it is a terrific novel. If you get a chance, you should take a look at it.
Danny, how did you feel when they brought this role to you?
Well, I felt really, really good. Arnon Milchan, who's been a dear friend of mine since War of the Roses, he was one of the producers of War of the Roses. He sent the screenplay and said, take a look at this. And I just thought, you read a good screenplay, and it's like and a really terrific character, and I wanted to be part of it. And it's an ensemble movie, really, and wonderful parts with Kevin Spacey and Jamie Cromwell, and Russell Crowe and Guy Pearce. I mean, the fact that Curtis cast they're very, very good actors and very fresh. And Kim Basinger, who wouldn't want to work with her? And there you go.
But you don't pass judgment on a character like this, then. I mean, you're playing a taboo.
No, I can't. I like these kind of complex characters, and so you have to go for it. I went go for it like I am, getting up every day. I've got something that somebody wants, and I'm an entrepreneur. And as I say in the movie, it's 36. Circulation is 36,000 and climbing, and pretty soon it's going to be radio, and then television, and who knows? Once you give people whet the public's appetite for the truth, the sky's the limit. And here we all are in this room.
What's it like
You think that you really like playing these kind of characters.
Yeah.
What is it, though, that makes you keep gravitating
Well,
to these characters, and why do people keep casting you?
I enjoy playing characters that are look, I like all different. I like the industry that we're in, and I think that I think it's more fun to play characters that have other things going on. I mean, whether you're with a little girl or you're with in terms of the father who's like Matilda's dad, or I mean, it's really one of the worst portrayals of a dad you could ever be, but it's kind of more interesting and fun. I mean, Sam Stone, I'm killing my wife, or there's lots of good stuff in there that you can have fun with, and so I lean toward these kinds of.
Danny, what happened with Matilda?
It's just this summer we just passed the $100 million mark, and we're really excited about it. We sold almost 5 million cassettes in this country alone, and the picture's turning a profit. And I have the kids to thank, because they really stuck by the movie and they believed in it. And all the people who wrote great things about it, like 98% of the reviews were really positive, and I really appreciate that. And when a studio's not behind the movie, the people have to make it successful. And it's not why you're in the business. You just want people to appreciate your work. And I think it's a really terrific movie, and the proof is in the pudding.
Danny, can you talk about this year? We see a lot of film noirs coming out of the studios. We haven't seen that in a long time. We had Mulholland Falls a couple of years back. Prior to that, almost none. A couple of different films. Can you talk about why do you think the genre fell out of favor, and why is it coming back?
Well, things go in really interesting, stages and stuff. I mean, before War of the Roses, I mean, you couldn't do a movie that was as dark as that. And then all of a sudden, the movie it was then people were treating their lead characters in a different way. It was okay to kill Michael and Kathleen, even though, I mean, they did deserve it. But the thing is that, that was very, very touch and go to get that movie done. Arnon Milchan happened to be involved in that movie as well. Why they go in a certain direction is anybody's guess. The fact that this is a really terrific screenplay, L.A. Confidential, and that Curtis has had two good, back-to-back with Hand That Rocks the Cradle and with the River Wild, he has passion for it. Other people Arnon certainly had passion for it, and the people in the, all the cast members. So, to get a movie made, and Warner Brothers, just stood up and did the right thing, and whether or not that's going to release a flood of we all love noir when it's done right, and true to it, and I think this is really done right. So I don't know if I'm answering the question. All I know is that you're always looking for the good ones. And
you produce films as well. What's the experience like when you're working on a film and you have a juicy part like this and you're not the man at the top versus a film where you're enjoying it and you're not the man on top? Or you are?
No, not the man
You
on
know,
top.
yeah.
Okay, I got it. So, the idea is that, like, film is it's a collaborative art. We're all doing a job. Everybody's there. Whether it's, the director, the producer, the actors, the writers, the scene designers, the costumers, everybody has a job. So I look at this, it's all one kind of thing. We're all aiming at the same, goal to do the best work we can. And I enjoy working with, other directors. I just finished a movie with Francis Coppola, and I'm really excited. It's coming out in November. It's called The Rainmaker, and I'm just acting in that as well. And so I feel good about being part of it, and I feel like if I do my job right, then I've made a contribution to the movie, and whoop-de-dee. I just spend a little bit more time in my trailer, camper life, when you're just acting. Then if you're acting and directing, you're never in your camper.
Who do you play in The Rainmaker?
I play Deck Shiflett, who is a paralawyer. He is a guy who's tried to pass the bar 6 times and has failed. But the main thing is it's a wonderful, I thought, Francis wrote the screenplay. I think he did a terrific job, and so Matt Damon plays Rudy Baylor, who's my partner, young partner. He has a license to go in and be a lawyer. I don't want to do lawyer jokes. Okay, I don't know. Back off.
So you're a good guy. So you're a good guy.
I'm a good guy.
You're a good guy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have unconventional methods of obtaining evidence, but I'm a good guy. It's. You know what I mean? What am I going to do? Play St. Francis of Assisi all my life? In my personal life, I'm like Gandhi. But on the screen, I am not.
When you do a film like Rainmaker or like LA Confidential, do you read the novels?
I do. I read the novels. I read anything I can get my hands on that tells me about, what we're doing. Unless somebody says different, like they say, don't read the novel. I don't want you to look at that because I don't know. That's never happened. But I'm just saying, personally, what I would go for right away is as much information as I could to give me the feeling of as if I were this person in this life, in this place.
So
Danny,
when
what's
you
on
say
the
it's out
board
of sight,
for it?
is that,
Out of,
are you working on Out of Sight?
Out of Sight, we're producing, starts in 2 weeks. Jennifer Lopez, George Clooney, Ving Rhames, Don Cheadle, Steven Soderbergh is directing, Dennis Farina's in it, and
You play?
I'm just the big guy this time. I'm just the producer. I'm not playing.
Anything else on the boards over at Jersey?
We have Gattaca coming out in October, and we have a couple of movies that are one movie that starts in the new year, and also a movie that was called A Kiss until that book came out, which was that. This is not about incest. This is a movie that Richard LaGravenese wrote and directed that I'm in with Holly Hunter, and that's going to come out next year sometime, and he's editing now, as Richard is his first venture as a director, and he's did a really good job. It's really terrific.
You had an
Yeah, Gattaca. We produced Gattaca. Andrew Nichol is this New Zealander who's he wrote The Truman Show, which is a movie that Peter Weir's doing with Jim Carrey. That's where I was introduced to the guy. I read the script. I thought it was really inventive, and and I said, well, what else? Because this was already gone, taken up, and then I read this movie about genetic discrimination happens in the near future, and it's 2 classes of people, the valids and the invalids. Ethan Hawke is trying to disguise himself to get somewhere, as a valid, and it's really, I thought it was very intriguing and fresh. And then after we started making the movie, then all the stuff started coming out with the sheep and the this and the that. I could have told them about the sheep long ago. No.
There's the quote.
Newspaper ad.
Do you think, though, that you have a Midas touch where producing is concerned, though? Because it seems like you set out on a mission to accomplish something with Jersey, and you're really following through with it.
I have good partners, Stacy Scher, Michael Schamberg, and the people at the company are very energetic and all interested in the same things, and we're trying to do the best we can. And and that's the thing about it. You get up there and you look for the good material. You want to work with the people who have passion in their, exhibit passion for their work, and and you get up to the plate and you take that cut. You know what I mean? Get that swing, and depends on how much bat you get on that ball. Why am I talking a baseball?
Danny, you took out
I don't even play baseball.
Danny, you took out a really unusual newspaper.
Yes.
Gattaca. Can
Yes.
you talk about that? I mean,
Yeah.
you look at it, you don't even think it's about the
Yeah,
film.
we have a couple of them that we're really proud of. One of them is it the one with the baby that you're talking about? Yeah. It's it's right around the corner, which is like scary to me. I think. That right now they're mapping out the body. That's what they're doing. They're mapping every single combination and trying to find ways to put the G's and the A's and the T's and the C's together. That's what Gattaca is. Gattaca is in all of your helix, in all of your makeup, in all of your DNA. That's how they read it, by G's and A's and T's and C's. If you ever saw it printed out, it's just a sea of Gattacas. I mean, Gattaca is like a combination of these letters that Andrew put together. It's the name of the company that takes people into other galaxies. But basically, so anyway, the ad, we wanted to be provocative. We want people to, understand what we're doing really in a big way. We want people to talk about it, because there are, we'd like people to go see the movie, obviously. We have this ad, and we have a few other ones. We have ones that are Uma Thurman's face, and it says The Prisoner, and then underneath it says her cell, and you see her cell, like not jail bars, but... And in a sense, it's what it is, because very soon they will be able to, in our film, a trace of saliva on a cup, a fingernail, a hair, a flake of skin, will be able to tell them exactly who you are. They'll know inside and out once they have it. They will be able to record every stitch of information about you. And what's scary is they'll know if you're born and they take a sample of your DNA, they'll know your life expectancy. They'll tell you whether you're going to have heart disease, whether you're going to be bald, how tall you're going to be, what color your eyes will be. All these things will be like, and in our film what happens is there's two classes of people that emerge, the valids and the invalids. The valids are ones who've had their eggs and their sperm by their parents altered so that they have all the good things. Like, for instance, I wouldn't mind like getting rid of Alzheimer's disease. We don't need that. You know what I'm saying? Heart disease, we could do away with that. You know what I'm saying? But, if you want your kid to be a pianist, that's a piano player, and you want 6 fingers on each hand, maybe you're obsessive, they could do that too. You know what I'm saying? So, there's got to be, it's very scary what's going on. Anyway.
In sessions like this, we've heard a lot about what people did before they made it, and I'm trying to imagine Mr. Danny and what kind of...
You mean what I did as in my life?
Yeah.
Before I got to be the movie mogul that I am, and a speech therapist as well. 5, she's coming in with her hand. Well, I'm from Jersey. I'm from Asbury Park, and I did a lot of things. I used to work on the rides, putting the kids on the rides when I was 14. That was my first job. I think I had working papers when you're 14. Before that, actually, I worked I sold soda in a bingo hall. That was a good job. Oh, that was like really terrific. I was like in 7th grade when I had that job. It was my first job. I remember that like it was yesterday. Wish it was yesterday, but it was a long time ago, and where is Sister Florentine now? Anyway, so and I did like a lot of other things. It was grass, and like everybody has jobs when they're young people, summer jobs, and my sister had a beauty parlor, and I went to work for her one year. I was out of high school, and she said, why don't you go do this? And I said, what, are you kidding me? I don't even look like a hairdresser. What are you talking about? She said, I'll send you to school. You come to work here. He said, go on, try it out. So I went down to this place. I came back. I was like totally excited. She says, you liked it? I said, liked it? It's like 98% women in this place. It's like just young girls learning how to do hair, and me and a couple other jamokes. You know what I mean? What's not to like? Please.
Can you didn't you used to room with Michael Douglas?
Mikey D, yeah.
Do you have any anecdotes from those?
Well, Mikey and I met at the Eugene O'Neill Foundation in Connecticut. He's a good buddy of mine. He remains my best friend. We were very close, and we decided to share an apartment. It was like in the late '60s, and actually he found this apartment, and I liked it. I weaseled my way in, and we shared the rent, and then he got Streets of San Francisco, and he went out to California, and he still shared the rent, which is a good guy. He's a really good guy. I missed him, especially laundry days, because he was like. What a folder and you know what I mean? He could really do the laundry really well, and I was like,
Speaking of Danny DeVito, the movie mogul, if you were starting all over again, or you were going to start all over again,
yeah.
do you think you would have taken the same path? And what advice do you think you would have given to someone starting out?
Well, the thing about it is you go one day at a time, you go moment to moment, and that's basically how you have to work. I mean, right now is the most important time for you. Just this second right here. See what you're doing right now, whether you're applying yourself to, you're an actor, or you're reading, or you're studying, you're learning about other people, or whatever you're doing. So I never really looked at very, very too far ahead. I just reacted and acted upon the cause and effect of what's going on. You sweat things like anybody, but the main thing is that you have to be concentrated on what you're doing. In terms of talking to people who are just, finding out, coming out of school or going to school or doing it, it's just the main thing is just applying yourself, as concentrated and as, as much as you can on what you're doing, focusing on that and trying to find what's true for yourself. And that's basically it.
How's Rhea doing?
Rhea's doing really well, and the kids are doing well, and they're back at school, and that's really cool. And my oldest daughter is a freshman in high school. I can't believe it. And my youngest daughter is in 7th grade, and my son is in 4th grade, and everything's rolling along.
Isn't it getting harder, though, for them to have celebrity parents
No.
now than it was when they were younger? Or?
No, they're less scared now than they were when they were younger. My kids are really... God bless them, they're doing really well. They feel our family's going along really well, and it's not difficult. They might have things that bother them about it, but basically I think it's cool.
But you have driving lessons then right around the corner.
Coming up.
Are you going to do the teaching?
Oh, yeah. Listen, I'm from New Jersey. We used to drive. We were 15 years old. You get behind the wheel, even though you couldn't drive until you were 17. The idea is that, I trust that it's going to be, it's going to be a lot of fun. And, I'll warn you, though, when she starts so that you can all, make sure that.
One last question.
Will you be directing again?
Right now, that's I'm planning to do. I'm hoping that one of the things that I have a few things that I'm thinking about will be the one that I direct next, and that's hopefully coming up real soon.
And that'll be for your own company, right?
Yeah.
Thanks
So
to
you were a
carny at one point? You actually kids quick.
I wasn't a carny because a carny is not that. I worked at the kiddie rides at the beach, and I put, like when the kids go on the little, what do you call it? The fire engines or the boats or the whatever, and I put them on, and then take the tickets and start the ride when they're all strapped in.
Yeah, Asbury Park had them on the boardwalk.
Yeah.
I lived in Long Branch, had my first radio job in Eatontown.
Oh, yeah, Eatontown. Boy, was that a great drive-in or what? The Eatontown drive-in. That was it.
So what's the new hot laser disc?
Oh. Let's see, the new hot one, I guess. That's a good question. What'd I just get?
The best additions to it? Anything?
I don't know. I've been into DVDs lately. I've been getting. I like them. Compact, lots of info. They're really nice. I like them. I like them a lot.
So you'll be doing that?
I hope they do. I think it's really, it's really a nice thing to have that. I like the packaging. I don't know. It's something about, you got that little disc, and years and years of your life is on that little. It's like reminds me. What's that movie where they had the rings? You remember that? Was it Journey to the Center of the Earth or what was that movie where they had those little? They look like rings that you got off a merry-go-round, and you spun them, and they told a story of. You remember that?
Yeah, the Time Machine.
Time Machine. Yeah, and it was like they spun and they told you everything that was going on, and I thought that was cool.
It's great.
Thanks, Danny.
Oh, it got schmudgied
Got
up?
schmudgy.
Okay.
Thanks. I need an unschmudgy one.
I'll do it right across this.
Kim.
Mm.
Yeah.
These are
Okay.
yours, right?
Oh, yeah, they are. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll take those so I'm not recognized in the hallway. Okay, nice seeing you all. Good to see you. Thank you.
Okay, so that was Danny DeVito. Greg, you got anything you want to say about this?
I wanted to share the spoiler quote. I really
All right.
wanted.
That you've been holding on to it this whole time.
Okay,
the
later.
entire half hour we've been listening to that, sitting here just listening to it with you guys. Greg's just been sitting on this one thing he really wanted to say.
It's an obvious
guys. I'm lying. We listen to these things in advance. We don't listen to them when we're recording the stuff.
Here's the thing, folks. Also, Matt doesn't listen to me because why should he? Okay, so here's a quote. Here's the quote from, that's the truth, but here's a quote from Danny DeVito about living life. It's an obvious quote, but I thought it was nice and poetic.
Go for it.
Quote, you go one day at a time, moment by moment. You go moment to moment. I mean, there's nothing funny about that. I just thought it was really cool.
They sound like song lyrics.
Yeah. Oh, maybe. There's a movie called
not that they already are, but that they could be.
They could be. There's a movie called Moment to Moment starring Gene Seberg. I also really enjoyed his little anecdote about selling soda at a bingo hall. Who sells soda at a bingo hall these days?
I have. You haven't?
Never have. Matt, you have some good stuff to say about Mr. DeVito.
I got a few things. I can't promise that they're good. He talked about a movie that he called The Kiss. But he said that they couldn't call it The Kiss because that title was taken, so it was going to be something different. He didn't know what it was yet. He gave some hints about what movie this is when he said that it starred him and Holly Hunter and that it was the directorial debut of Richard LaGravenese. Greg, do you care to guess what movie he was talking about?
I'm thinking Living Out Loud.
Very good. 1998's Living Out Loud. Queen Latifah was in that too.
I've never seen that movie.
I did. I did the junket for it.
Oh.
But I don't remember anything about it.
That memorable.
Yeah. Sorry, folks. Now, when you started listening to this interview, Greg, you probably had no idea that you were going to learn that Michael Douglas is an excellent folder when he does his laundry.
Oh, right.
See, this show is educational. For those of you who have wondered for years why Catherine Zeta-Jones's clothing never looks wrinkled, now you know.
He's a folder.
He's a folder. Not a... what? What would be the opposite of folder?
I guess for like me, I'm just a pig. A mess,
Okay.
an unfolder.
Okay, so you were like the opposite of Michael Douglas.
I was the opposite of
I've
Michael
been saying
Douglas.
that for years, actually, and now suddenly we have context that explains it.
Very good.
Towards the end of the interview, I did ask Danny DeVito whether he was getting ready to direct again, and he answered that he had 3 or 4 different things, but he wasn't sure which one he was going to go with. It actually took him another 5 years until he directed again, and it was 2002's Death to Smoochie. So maybe he should have let that choice percolate a little longer.
What are you saying?
Not the best film.
Okay.
Although Jon Stewart was an actor in it, so at least there's that.
Yes. I remember a couple of funny lines, but I remember really not liking that film.
It's awful. Then right at the very end of the interview, when he was signing autographs, he started raving about this brand new technology of DVDs. I'm not sure those are going to catch on. I guess we're just going to have to see.
Very good.
So that's all I've got for DeVito. Unless you've got anything else, I think, are we ready to move on to Curtis Hanson?
Yeah, we are ready to move to Curtis Hanson. I know you have a lot of things to say about him right now regarding the intro.
I've got a few. I did see that he started making movies in 1970, which was the year that I was born. Greg, do you want to take us through some of his filmography? Do you have that up on your laptop right in front of you?
I do not.
Well,
but I do remember him. He did direct The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, which I really enjoyed. That was a popcorn film. There's another film I believe he directed. This is just, I'm not looking actually at my Chromebook. He directed The River Wild, I believe.
He did 8 Mile with Eminem.
8 Mile. There's another film of his that had a little bit of film noir inspirations like LA Confidential. There's an underrated film called Bad Influence, starring Rob Lowe and James Spader, which was quite excellent. But it wasn't until L.A. Confidential. I mean, he did have a great commercial cachet thanks to The Handler That Rocks the Cradle, River Wild. But, L.A. Confidential really put him on the map as far as just higher echelon creative filmmakers.
Yeah, he had a couple of hits under his belt, so Hollywood liked him because he could make moneymakers, but this was the one that proved he was a great artist as well.
And not only that, Matt, he, as you can tell from this interview, listening to this interview, he discusses his love for Los Angeles, how L.A. Confidential eventually, after all these years, was at that point his most personal movie. And if you actually look at his filmography, Matt, he's done a lot of great work. I would single out L.A. Confidential as his masterpiece.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Now, because I like to bring things to a really depressing place, that seems to be my role with this show.
Yes, thank you, Matt, for that.
Sure. Curtis Hanson retired from filmmaking in 2012 because he started suffering from, let me see if I can pronounce this, frontotemporal dementia. Then he died in 2016 of natural causes at the age of 71. But putting more of a positive spin on it, this is actually something about this podcast that I'm really proud of, that in a way we sort of bring the dead back to life. This interview is 33 minutes long, and you can close your eyes and it's like you're sitting in the room with him. And he's alive and he's creative and enthusiastic about this piece of art that he just made. And it's really like a cool bit of time travel that these tapes can create.
And yeah, to your point, Matt, there's also my favorite moment, actually, selfishly, regarding this. And this is for you listeners. Curtis Hanson, even before he was a filmmaker and lover of LA, he was a diehard cinephile. And what you're also...
So he really loved that Bruce Willis movie.
Oh boy, yeah, that's a light moment. Die Hard,
but more the sequels, I think, because the original. But oh my God, five was so good.
Very good. Oh, okay. But if you're a fan, there's a filmmaker named Samuel Fuller. He directed The Big Red One, a whole bunch of great, as Fuller would say, yarns. He's one of my favorite filmmakers. Towards the end of the interview, I asked him about this film called White Dog, and it's a film that he helped Fuller get on the screen. He had a professional and personal friendship with the late Sam Fuller. So you're going to hear a lot about his own relationship with Samuel Fuller. And also there is some information regarding White Dog at that moment.
It's a pretty interesting section of the interview, and we'll dissect it afterwards.
All right.
But definitely listen out for that. If you listen carefully, Greg actually asks several questions on this interview. So way to go, Greg.
Dead Space. I don't know what. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
At one point in the interview, you are going to hear Alan Silverman say, when Russell Crowe was here a few minutes ago, and I should explain that, yes, Alan Silverman is indeed a wizard with godlike power over space and time, but he's not actually utilizing that here. His grasp on the timeline is correct. On the junket day, we did interview Russell Crowe before we interviewed Curtis Hanson, but for this podcast, we've shuffled the order around, to add drama and pacing. And also as a deliberate ploy to make Alan Silverman sound out of touch with reality. Sorry, Alan. Please don't use your power to go back in time and erase my existence.
And a little teaser, my extra teaser. I'm not going to name the movies, but if you're really into some of the film noir recommendations or influences that infuse LA Confidential, Curtis Hanson names a bunch of those movies in the interview. I'm not going to spoil it for you.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think that was because you asked him to, right?
I forget because I never ask questions, Matt.
But you asked a few here.
Yes.
So
yes.
I think that was one of yours.
Okay.
So listen for that. Listen for Greg Srzewowski actually opening his mouth. It's really cool.
And I sound really cool in a fetal position once in a while. Here is Curtis Hanson.
So what kind of a challenge was it to take this book that has so much texture to it and to trim it down to a 2-hour movie?
We're jumping right in, aren't we? Yes. It was enormous. It was an enormous challenge adapting James Ellroy's novel to a workable screenplay, workable for a movie, because, as you know, Ellroy does not write books that are blueprints for movies the way a lot of people do these days. He writes dense, intricately constructed books with subplots and backstories and so forth, which is why they are such rich reading experiences. But having said that, it was such an exciting opportunity for myself and Brian Helgeland, my screenwriting partner, because most movies today are extremely linear in their construction. A very simple story that's very easy to sum up in one line for marketing purposes, and generally they're designed to follow one character played by somebody between the age of Tom Cruise and Harrison Ford, let's say, and you follow this one character from beginning to end. And, you know, that's all well and good, but I wanted to do something different. I'd made a couple movies that were commercially successful, and I decided to use whatever leverage I had at the moment to step up and say, I found this book, and I would like to turn this into a movie, and I would like you to let me make it the way in which I would like to make it, which involves some unusual casting and so forth. The miracle is that I was allowed to do it.
Unusual casting. You picked 2 Australian actors to play.
Well, I had no intent in casting Australians. You know, Russell Crowe I knew of from a picture called Romper Stomper, and he gave a tremendous performance in that, and I knew he could play the brutal side of Bud White. I didn't know if he could play the rest of the character, so I flew him over here and met with him and worked with him and put him on tape doing a couple scenes. Guy Pearce, it's sort of a Cinderella story for aspiring actors, because I saw Guy on a day when I was seeing actors every 15 minutes. And Guy came in the door. I'd never seen him before. I'd never heard of him. I had no idea who he was. He sat down, he gave a reading of a scene, and he was terrific. And I then worked with him, had him do it over again, and then called him back and worked with him some more. And when I was putting him on tape, he actually said to me, "What did you see in my performance in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert that made you think I could play Ed Exley?" And I confessed that I had never seen Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, nor did I intend to, because I now had him as my vision of Exley, and I didn't want to have my confidence shaken by watching him run around and drag for 2 hours, no matter how well he might do it.
Talent aside, though, was it ever a concern that you're going to have somebody who American audiences really only know as a drag queen playing your solid, upstanding cop?
I have to tell you that since I was not financing the movie, I didn't look at it as a commercial risk. I looked at it as a creative asset, because getting back to Elroy's novel, one of the things that really intrigued me about it was that when I met those characters in the book, I found my feelings about them changing as the story unfolded, and that experience was one of the things I wanted to try and give to the moviegoer. And having 2 actors that the worldwide movie audience is not that familiar with is actually helpful in that regard, because, you know, movie stars are great. And part of the reason they're great is that we all feel we have an emotional history with them. And right away when we see them, we like them from what we remember. And that tells you kind of where the story's going. Well, in LA Confidential, I wanted to do the opposite of that. I wanted these characters to be what they appeared to be, and then let the audience discover them as the story went along.
How easy was it to recreate? Did it surprise you how easy it is to recreate LA in the 50s, in the 90s?
Well, it didn't surprise me because it wasn't easy. That was a huge task that I and my team of Dante Spinotti, the cameraman, Janine Oppawal, the production designer. We have 45 locations in this movie, and here we are in Los Angeles, a city that is famous actually for its disregard of its own past. And to go out and try and create the Los Angeles of my memory as a child and find these locations and have them also hang together in a cohesive whole, as opposed to just being a grab bag of miscellaneous locations, was an enormous challenge. But again, that was part of the excitement of this project. I mean, it would be silly to use my moment in the sun to do something that was easy or that everybody wanted to do. I chose LA Confidential for these very reasons.
Was there a particular location? I'm sorry, just to follow up, and I'll leave you alone. Was there one particular location that was an absolute gold mine? I mean, something that you didn't know existed, or you kind of weren't sure still existed, that was just too good to be true?
Well, I know L.A. well, because I grew up here, and there are certain locations in the movie that came easily to me, such as the Frolic Room and the Formosa, and even the Baldwin Hills oil field. I had shot there actually once before on a picture called Bad Influence. The one location that I would say was actually somewhat difficult to find, but is sort of a key to the movie because it's a key to the theme of the movie, is the house in which Kim Basinger lives. And the reason that's a key is that I wanted that house to, in effect, be a stage setting in which she creates the illusion, the romance of old Hollywood, and that's the image that she's selling to her customers. Whereas everything else in the movie, I wanted to feel part of the modern-looking 50s. That house is sort of a throwback to the earlier era, the golden years of Hollywood. So I consider that, and frankly, I consider Kim's part sort of the cornerstone of the whole movie as well.
Did you redo the Herschel wallpaper in the Frolic Room, or did you just shoot it so you can't see all the credit on the...
Yeah, no, that wallpaper is there. The Frolic Room we actually did very little work to. We changed the color of the lamps a little bit, and of course put in our own jukebox so that Dean Martin could sing "Powder Your Face with Sunshine" as Kevin Spacey looks in the mirror and just has that moment of what have I become.
You know how we love to label things, and I'm sure you've seen it and heard it already, that film noir, this is being heralded as the return of film noir or the resurgence of film noir. How do you feel about that, first of all, and also how do you define that style? What's the appeal of it?
Well, I got to tell you, I resisted that label for the longest time, and in fact, on this movie, when I was pitching it for the financing, I put together a group of 15 photographs that represented how I felt this movie should look and feel, and even the theme of the movie. And the reason I did that was, as soon as you say crime, and you say L.A., and you say period, everybody starts thinking of The Big Sleep or Chinatown, those classics from the 30s and the 40s, Raymond Chandler's world. And I wanted to do something different. And when you say film noir, I think of that classic film noir of the 40s, the black and white photography, the long dark shadows. And yet I wanted this picture to have the personality of the tabloid journals, to be lurid and colorful and even funny. But in the broader sense of noir, the word means darkness, and certainly LA Confidential deals with the darkness beneath the bright. The image of the 50s of optimism and booming economy, and as Johnny Mercer says at the beginning of the movie, accentuating the positive. Well, LA Confidential deals with what's underneath that and what is being repressed, and I think no word sums up the 50s probably as well as repression.
What were the 15 photographs? You said you put together 15 photographs?
Well, some of them I'd had for years. For instance, one of them is actually the first shot in the movie. It's this old postcard that says Los Angeles on it, and it has these images of utopia in the sun, and you hear Danny DeVito say, "Come to Los Angeles." And there were a couple of archival newspaper shots, for instance, the opening of the Hollywood freeway, houses going up in the San Fernando Valley. Then I had a particularly salacious cover of Confidential magazine, and as I sat with first Arnon Milchan, I said, this is the image of LA. Now with the Confidential magazine cover, we peel that image back and get to where our characters live. And then I had some sort of Ouija type crime scene photos, a couple of photos of some personalities of the time, such as Aldo Ray, and I said, this is what Bud White will feel like. A shot of a very preppy, intelligent-looking man with glasses, and I said, this is what Ed Exley will feel like. A couple of shots of movie stars from the earlier era, so I could say, this is what we're not doing, except when Kim Basinger sells it to the suckers. And then a couple of very sexy contemporary shots of women wearing clothes that were inspired by the 50s design. And the point was, when the audience sits there, they won't be saying, look how quaint the clothes used to be, but in fact they'd be saying, hey, those are hip clothes, I'd like to be wearing those. And there was a couple of shots of jazz musicians, Jerry Mulligan and Chet Baker, because I was making the point, look at how they look. They look like, in fact, Chet Baker was used in a Gap ad. And by the way, these guys will be providing some of the music in the movie.
You also screen movies like Kiss Me Deadly, In a Lonely Place, those Cirque films. What was about these movies that made that?
Well,
As opposed to like The Bad and the Beautiful.
I screened The Bad and the Beautiful too. Once I had my collaborators kind of coming on board, I had a mini little film festival and started with The Bad and the Beautiful. And I started with that to say, look, this picture more than almost any other captures and perpetuates the romance of Hollywood. This is what we're not doing, except with Kim Basinger's character when she's deliberately selling it. Then I had other pictures like In a Lonely Place, which shows the emotional wasteland behind the glamour, a couple of Don Siegel movies, Private Hell 36 and The Lineup, because my number one directive to my collaborators was, let's create a world unique to LA Confidential. Let's pay great attention to the details, hence these 15 photos. But once we've got the details, let's push them into the background and shoot the movie as though we don't care about the details. Shoot it as though it were a contemporary movie so that the audience can react to the characters and their emotions. Because I didn't want to tell this story through a lens of nostalgia. I didn't want the scenes to be about the cars or the clothes or the set dressing. And directors like Don Siegel and Robert Aldrich, that's what they did. You know, they didn't care about the cars because they were ordinary. They were just the cars that people were driving down the street every day.
It seems to me that you've realized your vision. How difficult is that to do, to realize a vision on film? And why is it such a difficult thing? So many directors, I know they think they have done it, but the audience doesn't. The audience went right along with you and loved it. How difficult is that?
Well, it's difficult. It's taken me this long to do it. You know, this is definitely my most personal movie, and I feel it's my best movie. And it's been a long road getting here. I've made a couple of movies that were retitled, re-edited, very unhappy experiences. I then moved along and did better work under better circumstances. And then, as I say, I was fortunate enough to enjoy some commercial success, which in a sense gave me some leverage to have better circumstances. And when Arnon Milchan agreed to let me cast Russell Crowe and Guy Pearce, and then we greenlit the movie, I then knew that I'd be able to cast the rest of the movie, hire the collaborators I wanted, and have freedom right down to the picking of every song. And what I found on this movie, a very valuable lesson, was with these 15 photos, by being that specific with my collaborators, rather than inhibiting their creativity, it in fact freed them up to be more creative, because they were able to feel that they understood the vision that I had, and they were able to move forward with confidence, knowing that we were all moving in the same direction. Movie making is definitely a team effort, and anybody who tells you different is full of it. And you know, your most valuable members on that team are the cast, and I had an unbelievable cast in this picture.
Regarding the wind-up of the picture, it bears some resemblance to the shootout in Bonnie and Clyde. I was wondering if that was at all influential. Also, why didn't you kill any character? I mean, it seems like he takes several bullets point blank, and he walks away.
Well, he took 3 shots, none of them point blank, and we thought about killing him off. I hope, you know, I don't like to give away things that happen in the movie, but you know, thematically, what we did seemed the most appropriate thing, because we have a character on the one hand who's a policeman sort of for the wrong reasons, and he sorts his life out and is no longer going to be a policeman. Well, you wouldn't get that resolution if he was dead along the way. No, I had no conscious thought of Bonnie and Clyde at all. You know, I love Bonnie and Clyde and many other movies, but I try not to think about them when I'm doing my own storytelling.
Have there been any follow up? Can you talk about the difficulties of doing a project like this? The story is more of a sprawling story. Was there some concern that there was no center to the thing to hold it together? I mean, was that a fear going into it?
Not a fear of mine. You know, Brian Helgeland and I spent over a year constructing the screenplay from Elroy's novel, and we spent literally a month and a half just talking about the outline of that screenplay. And again, we were excited at the prospect of having a story to tell where the characters were more or less what we were focused on, and we felt very strongly about those characters, and those characters are the center. And to whatever degree Elroy is happy with the movie, which thrills me, I take it as a tremendous compliment. I think it's because when he looks at the final movie, although many plot things have changed, those characters, the essence of them, is still there, and clearly his book was our inspiration.
Well, that's something that Russell was very clear on, that he really complimented you and praised you for preserving the voice of the author. And yet at sessions like this, we've heard directors and writers say that a book is a book and a movie is a movie, and you shouldn't necessarily compare the two.
Well, a book is a book and a movie is a movie, and yet I have a great love of storytellers. You know, I was a reader as well as a movie fan growing up, and the storytellers that I loved were great storytellers like Twain and Dickens and Balzac. In the movies, they were storytellers like Hawks and Ford and Huston and Hitchcock. And Elroy's book is what got me going, and it would be crazy of me not to respect what was my initiation to having interest in telling this story.
Although a lot about LA has changed, at least physically, since the 50s, you're also struck by the fact that a lot of it hasn't changed.
Well, that gets back to the theme and why Los Angeles, why did I want to tell a story set here in 1953? And not only did I grow up here and have, those memories of childhood, but so much that was starting in Los Angeles in 1953 is still with us today. The freeways, which I'm sure some well-meaning people thought was a good idea, but the freeways destroyed much of what was good in Los Angeles and other cities. The television as this image-making machine that was used to sell the police force to the public through shows like Dragnet and so forth. The birth of tabloid journalism, as we know it, which was at that time a reaction to the press, the fan magazines that were controlled by the studios that did little more than create these unbelievably idealized images of stars. Well, it was a natural reaction to sort of peel back that image and tell the truth. And as Devito says at the beginning of the movie, radio, television, once you whet the public's appetite for the truth, the sky's the limit. Well, that's where we are today, and a lot of people are saying maybe there should be some limits.
Let's say someone actually wants to kind of go back in time and see that kind of world from 1953, 54. Where would you take them on that?
In Los Angeles? Yeah. Well, the fascinating thing about Los Angeles is even though so much has changed here, as I drive around the city in the various neighborhoods, like ghosts, you can see images of LA's past. Even though the neighborhoods have changed, and I mean neighborhoods that I knew as a child, now you go there, you not only would think you're in another country, you'd think you're in another continent. And yet, when you look beneath the signage and so forth, you can still see what it was like in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, or the 50s. It was a great learning experience for my whole crew, actually, making this movie, because you kind of put on your blinders. And for the 3 months that we were shooting, we were very focused on the LA that used to be before the freeways. And what struck all of us was how small this city was and how well it worked. We were in neighborhoods that were working class neighborhoods, very affordable, like where Mrs. Lefferts' house was in Echo Park. And 1 minute away was that park with the lake, and 10 minutes away you were in downtown.
Did you use some tapes and transcripts from the Rodney King trial to get people up to speed, as it says in the notes, or was that?
Well, I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question. Yes, in terms of the actors' research, the actors, we gave them training films from the LAPD from the 50s that we got. They also read, journals and biographies of people that in more contemporary times, and yes, looked at the Rodney King things. And
what relevance did you feel that had?
Well, again, I feel that what started then is still with us now. And in fact, one of the preview cards that I really enjoyed from one of our test screenings, which means more here in Los Angeles than anywhere else, but this person wrote down, when we look at Ed Exley in the movie, the character played by Guy Pearce, are we meant to think that that's the young Daryl Gates? You know, and you can see where that person's coming from, and I'm glad to have people thinking about that.
What is Sam Fuller like as a person? And can I find White Dog at the local video store?
No, White Dog you cannot find in the local video store, although one of these days you probably will be able to, because they just had a double screening of it at the American Cinematheque, which I attended and did a kind of Q&A afterwards to talk about why the picture was in effect banned and so forth. Sam is again a great storyteller, a passionate man, a brilliant director. You know, the shame of the whole White Dog thing was that this guy, more than almost any other American filmmaker, has dealt with racism throughout his career in movies, and to have him then be sort of tainted by that absurd controversy was just a real shame.
Where did that controversy start? I mean, and wasn't White Dog just on Bravo not too long ago or something?
Chris, maybe you can back up just a little, because probably a lot of listeners might not know the context of what we're talking.
White Dog was a movie made in 1982, an adaptation of a novel by Romain Gary that dealt with a young actress who accidentally hit a dog with her car and ended up adopting the dog, and then discovering through a horrifying series of incidents that this dog had been trained to attack and even kill black people. And Romain Gary's story was based in part on some actual incidents that happened to Gene Seberg, his one-time wife. A film was made that I co-wrote with Sam Fuller, and sight unseen, when the picture was finished, there was pressure brought to bear on the studio, Paramount, that this picture was either racist or dealt with things that were better left undealt with. And of course, the whole point of the movie and the book was that racism is something that is taught, it's an unnatural thing, and that even a dog, as benign a creature as a dog, could be twisted by this evil racism. And yet the studio folded under the pressure and shelved the movie. It was released in other countries around the world and was on numerous 10 best lists. And when I travel promoting pictures, as I've done in the last few years, I'm inevitably asked about White Dog because it's held in such high regard elsewhere.
Now, but it has been aired.
When it was shelved, it sort of years went by, and then it mysteriously appeared on cable on a couple of occasions.
What are your thoughts on the timing of the release of this movie, opening up in the shadow of the Princess Di tragedy?
Well, you know, it gets back to what I was saying before. I think many things that were starting in L.A. are very much with us today. And, you know, we had this incident in New York where the policeman beat up the man from Haiti, which echoes our Bloody Christmas scene. Well, that Bloody Christmas scene at the beginning of the movie is based on fact. That happened on Christmas Eve in 1952. It was much worse than we showed in the movie. It actually went on for 24 hours. The tabloid journalism thing is relevant today, even if that tragedy in Paris had not happened. You know, this whole obsession that people have with celebrities, and of course the methods of the paparazzi, all of that has been questioned before that happened.
Did you meet the 90s, I asked Russell this earlier, did you meet the 90s version of the Kevin Spacey character? Is there a police showbiz liaison who...
We did not have one. We had contact with a couple of retired detectives who we consulted with regarding just accuracy in terms of specifics, but we did not have someone like Kevin who, as we say in the movie, he teaches Brett Chase how to walk and talk like a cop. No.
Danny is fabulous in this film, but it isn't really a surprise to cast him in a role like this because he does it so well. Did you have any second thoughts about...
I wanted Danny to play that character of this inventor of tabloid journalism because I felt it was good to have an actor who would play the enthusiasm of that man. You know, it would be very easy and in a way tempting to have him just be a sleazy person that we could label evil and not like him. But that's much simpler than life is. You know, I mean, it would be easy if all racists were evil through and through, but that minimizes the problem. And I wanted Danny to come at it. He's a visionary. He's out there to tell the truth, you know, and that he happens to be hurting people along the way is not what his motivation's about or even where his mind is.
He's also your comic relief, isn't he?
Well, I used Danny Devito deliberately in the beginning, especially to sort of establish the voice of the movie. And the voice of the movie is both lurid and colorful and also funny. You know, you look at those old those magazines from that era, and the headlines are actually funny.
When you talked about authenticity or accuracy in talking to some of the retired cops, I would imagine that when you get so close to what really happened, that either they wouldn't want to talk about it, or even today's LAPD wouldn't necessarily want these bruises bared again.
How the LAPD will react to our movie is something I don't know. We'll know in a week or two.
What can we say about Kim, who's so perfect in this part?
Well, we could say a lot about Kim. You know, I am so thrilled by Kim's performance in this picture. I felt that she was the right person to play the part, because who else could capture the Veronica Lake look, also has the glamour of the golden age of Hollywood. And my hunch was that Kim Basinger, more than almost anybody, would recognize that look of Veronica Lake, the image of the hair over the eye, which is all most people remember, that image was both an asset and a trap. And I thought Kim would be eager to play the truth behind the image. What I was not prepared for, quite frankly, again, this gets back to image and reality. I didn't know Kim. I only knew her secondhand through the media and so forth. And I was completely unprepared for Kim Basinger, the actress, who presented herself to me in the most unbelievably trusting way, with so much courage. And I think her performance shows that. It's just so nakedly honest.
Did you cast her? I read an article where they said you cast her because she is slightly older than Russell Crowe, and you wanted to have that's not true.
No, I mean, obviously, I'm aware that she was somewhat older than Russell Crowe.
Times, and they said that you were trying to establish a mother-son part of that element in the relationship.
No, I felt a couple of things. One, on sort of outside our story, but just talking about movies in general, I'm a little tired of always seeing older men with younger women. You know, I enjoyed, for instance, in The River Wild, having Kevin Bacon opposite Meryl Streep. Kim, I felt, even though she's a few years older than Russell, she's so attractive, she's so appealing that nobody in their right mind would question what he finds appealing about her. And I thought she would bring to the part this sort of a resignation, first of all, about the ambitions that she had once had as an actress. She's now faced the truth, and she's able to not only face that truth in herself, but she can see the truth in these other characters, and in a sense she feels wiser than they are. So I thought all of that would work to advantage.
Do you direct Kevin Spacey, or do you just turn him loose in front of the camera?
Kevin, I must say, I did something to pat myself on the back that was extraordinarily smart, although I didn't realize it at the time. Kevin's somebody that I'd wanted to work with for literally a decade, and I could never get him approved because he wasn't bankable. And as Kevin, he wins the Oscar, and he's on everybody's hot list. And as Kevin said to me, we finally get to work together, Curtis, but now I get paid a lot more money. And what I did with Kevin is I met him at the Formosa, as I met Kim. I went through my 15 photos, and I wanted to land him. He hadn't read the script, and I thought he was the perfect guy for the part, and I wanted to make sure I got him. And I said, Kevin, when you read this script, I want you to think of 2 words. Dean Martin. And he smiled and he went, Dean Martin? And I said, yeah, the Dean Martin of the 50s, the epitome of 50s hip, the guy who's got the world on a string, he knows the answer to every question. And Kevin says, you mean the cool guy we wanted to be when we grew up? And I said, exactly. And, Kevin then brings to that part his brilliance to not only create that image, but again, show the man behind that image, which is why, by the way, at those two pivotal scenes in the movie, that the movie premiere Pot Bust, on the soundtrack I have Dean Martin singing Christmas Blues to kind of get you in that mood, and then later when Kevin's in the frolic room, Dean Martin's on the jukebox singing Powder Your Face with Sunshine as Kevin has that emotional turning point.
Is the Formosa someplace you actually hang out, or were you setting the scene when you met with them there?
I was setting the scene, and there's a certain veracity to the Formosa. There used to be gambling in the back. It was the natural place for Johnny Stompanato to be. Lana Turner used to hang out there. And I used to hang out there when I was first starting out as a journalist, because I used to do stories across the street at what was the Goldwyn Studios. And I used to go into the Formosa and see people that worked at the studios over there drinking it up in the afternoon. So it was a great homecoming for me to actually go in there and capture that place on film.
What's the bartender's name? The guy that's got all the stories. Do you remember?
I don't. Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris, how old are you?
52.
What's your license plate number?
That I don't know. There's a couple of C's in it.
Thank you.
When does this up?
Friday, September 19th.
Oh, wow. Right
This is
away.
a long lead, Chris.
Yeah.
It's just around the corner from where I screened this. So that one.
Yeah, that's why we screen across the street. It sort of gets everybody in the thing.
You're going to have the premiere party at the...
I wanted to, I wanted to do that.
I was one of those who did the radio campaign to save them when it looked like they were going to tear it down.
Yes. Well, the LA Conservancy was very involved in saving that, and on the end of the movie, you'll notice we thank you.
We did the morning show on cable. We were the first ones to jump on the bandwagon.
We're benefiting from the Conservancy with our great. Yeah.
It's great.
Thank you. Good pleasure.
We'll take a vote on it.
Thank you.
How many people?
Thank you, everybody. Enjoyed it.
Good luck with the pitch.
Thank you. Great.
Hey, we're back. That was Curtis Hanson. Now, he talked about the 1982 film that he co-wrote called White Dog. We talked a little bit about that before the interview. By the way, the movie starred Christy McNichol. At the time of this junket in 1997, the film was still banned in America, and there was no way to see the film out here. Well, I ran a quick search on Amazon, and the movie is available now on DVD, but not Blu-ray. If you want to see it in HD, you're going to need to pay import prices, and you'll probably have to own a region-free Blu-ray player. By the way, I also checked to see if they have it on Netflix Instant Streaming, and this is interesting. When you type in White Dog, this controversially banned examination of racism, what comes up is the Disney animated film Bolt. Because, he's a white dog, so close enough, right?
Yeah, they both explore similar themes, correct?
Yeah, I think they're practically the same movie. Greg, do you have anything more to say about Curtis Hanson?
By the way, White Dog is available on DVD, like Matt said, via the Criterion Collection.
Ooh.
Ding, ding. They're not our sponsor yet, Matt, but I just wanted to throw that in there.
Sure. Why not?
I hope Criterion's listening.
The Criterion discs are well known for having extensive bonus features and really doing deep dives into the film.
Yeah, and even their DVD transfers are in all seriousness, look just almost as good as the Blu-ray versions. Now, my final postscript is the films to watch if you did not get it in the interview regarding the films that were that influenced LA Confidential is Bad and the Beautiful, the Kirk Douglas movie, Kiss Me Deadly, In a Lonely Place, and the lineup, and Private Hell 36. After this interview, I remember actually scouring, what was it, the local video store DVD? I ended up hunting down Bad and the Beautiful, Kiss Me Deadly, and In a Lonely Place. Still haven't done the other two.
So that was back in the days when there were still places where you could do that.
Yeah, there were still like Blockbuster.
Yes.
Hollywood Video.
The Warehouse.
Yes.
Good old days.
Good old days. But so yeah, Curtis Hanson, that was a really cool interview. We are now moving forward, Matt, with
Kim Basinger. Who plays Lynn Bracken.
Yes.
We've got a 26-minute interview with her, and Greg, why don't you set that up?
I was going to use the notes for I thought she played Vicky Vale in this one.
She did. It's not her name, but she's basically playing Vicky Vale. When she keeps screaming out, "Help me, Batman," which is a little weird and out of context in LA Confidential, but I don't know. It kind of works.
It's not Vicky Vale now. It's another V. that V being Veronica Lake. Veronica Lake being the inspiration of Kim Basinger's character in LA Confidential. Her character is actually cut up to look like Veronica Lake, and she has, like Veronica Lake, that peekaboo hairstyle, which is when the hair goes down to the side of your face, exposing only one eye. You look very mysterious and sexy and beautiful. Neither Matt nor I could pull that off.
Well, I don't have hair anymore, so I can't pull off much of anything.
And I did. let's use that in a very G-rated context. Neither can I, folks. We're both old folks. Now, I really, at the moment, I remember at this junket, I was just so happy because seeing Kim Basinger, as much as I loved her in 9.5 Weeks, I'm a Noir fan. She really pulled this role off, and obviously the acclaim with the Oscar. I mean, I never saw that coming. I never saw the Oscar coming, and it came, and I was happy.
There's nothing like a surprise Oscar.
There's nothing like she was very good in this movie. I thought, the big performance in this movie were by Guy Pearce and Russell Crowe, but credit to Kim Basinger for the Oscar. And
she won for Best Supporting Actress for LA Confidential.
Best Supporting Actress. And, she's been asked this question a lot, but I'm glad she talks about during the interview about the hurdles of being beautiful and leaping over that hurdle. There's that part is discussed in the interview as well. Matt, are there a few teasers you want to give regarding Basinger?
I got nothing.
But anyways,
you were about to say it again, weren't you?
Okay, regarding Matt, I'm gonna honor Matt. With further ado, here is Kim.
I feel so honored.
Here is Kim Basinger.
It is. My God.
Well, we are aliens.
We are aliens, but that's okay.
We are all aliens.
We are all aliens.
In some form or another. And I'm going to ask you if you couldn't come up as much as you're comfortable.
Curtis Hanson said something interesting. He said that one of the reasons that he wanted you for this part was because you, as much as anybody, would understand that beauty and the look were both an asset and a trap. Does that make sense to you, or was he reading something?
Oh, that's very funny from him. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. It is an asset, It's a gift, and beauty is in the eye of the beholder, for number one. I mean, what someone thinks is beautiful might not be to someone else. So, but especially if you come to LA and you just do movies you are drawn to do, and one of them ends up giving you a little tag on the end of your name, sex symbol, then yeah, it causes a lot of problems for you. To be taken seriously, to be given the opportunity to do what it is you know you can do. There are hurdles you have to get over, absolutely. So I think in terms of that, he's absolutely right. I do know what that means.
Was there a moment for you when you felt you'd leaped over that hurdle, do you think?
The funniest thing about it, I was in a press conference this morning and somebody brought this thing up about when you knew or whatever. But the funny thing about it was, when I was a kid, I used to sit with my daddy for hours and watch these 40s and 50s old movies on TV. And I used to just watch him watch those images on the screen. And I'd watch his face probably more than the movies, because my daddy was very unemotional sometimes, and yet he could be so emotional watching these movies. And I probably ended up being an actress because of that. But I had that. It was an inherited thing, I think. My daddy and I had a love of movies and a love of music, and I sat there and I watched these images on the screen and how much care and preparation went into making these movies, and how much the women and the hair, the makeup, the wardrobe, and the great dialogue they got to say, and my daddy really gave me a great education as a very young little girl. I mean, he started me, that's Spencer Tracy, that's Katharine Hepburn, that's Cary Grant. He's done this. So I had a pretty good education when I headed off to New York at 17. And when I went to New York, I went for a reason. The modeling world beckoned me, but it was also a way to get out of Georgia and to make money. And because I always knew I wanted to sing and write, and somehow make it out to California and be an actress. But in watching those old films on TV, I used to ask myself, I used to say, so what would be my job here if I wanted to do that? And it was, okay, your job is to go to school. You have to learn to, I was a pretty good singer when I was a kid, so I said, you go to school, you learn how to sing, you learn how to dance, you learn your craft. So that's what I did. I went to New York. I went to New York by myself. I lived with Eileen Ford. I went to school at night and I worked in the daytime. I studied at the neighborhood playhouse for years, private classes, and then came out here and studied with Stella Adler, and studied at the Vocal Arts Foundation for years in New York, my voice. So I did my homework. And inside of me, I always felt I instinctively that, because I am an instinctive actress, that I knew I had the faith in myself, what I was able to do. So I never came to that place that people have often asked me about, when did you know? I did my job. Now, and then I made my summer money, I got on that bus, and I got off in Hollywood. I thought, and then you started, you hit the pavement, you look around until you're hired. Well, little did I know, that was not reality in Hollywood, but at least I did do my homework. I did go to school for this. I didn't just get on a bus and come out to California with the idea that beauty was going to catapult me into some magnificent role in the movies.
Which of those women in the 40s and 50s films you were watching? Which of those women from the 40s and 50s films you were watching did you most respond to, like Veronica Lake, Bliss Scott, Rita Hayworth, Jane Withers, Shirley Temple?
Well, Carole Lombard I adored, but I must say, Katharine Hepburn got pretty much the pick of the sometimes, and I don't know. I enjoyed so many people, even Veronica Lake. I had seen Veronica Lake in This Gun for Hire, and my daddy loved Veronica Lake. I Married a Witch. I thought she was, that's her most popular movie, and Ted Turner seems to love that movie. He shows it on TV all the time, so I've seen it, pieces of it, 60, 100 times. But in preparing for this role, I got my hands on every single one of her films, even the most obscure films. And I really discovered someone that was a truly exciting and talented woman, and unfortunately was more known for her hairdo than she was for her ability. So in talking about the physical as opposed to, and she was so far ahead of her time, and after I really got the hair and the makeup and the wardrobe down and really copied that from some of her films, and I did that whole physical research thing, I kept watching these movies and I could not, it was just a part of me. Those movies became a part of me, and I said, there's something else missing. I have to borrow something from you, Veronica, and I really think in her honor, I really wanted to borrow a little piece of her spirit and inject that in my character, and I really hope that translates, because wherever she is, she never got the credit she deserved, and boy, her name sure has been mentioned a lot in LA Confidential, and I think that's really, really wonderful. But it's that spirit, I think, that was a part of those old 40s and 50s movies that made these women.
She ended up such a tragic figure.
It was a tragedy. I mean, she was a tragic lady, but I loved her because of her spirit and her humor. I mean, even Frederick March, when they did the movie I Married a Witch together, they hated each other. She really didn't hate him. He hated her. And he was a very gifted, very talented man, and I think he thought, I don't know what he thought, I didn't know him, but he must have thought he was superior to her or something. But I know there was a scene where he has to carry her up a staircase, and they had to do it about 10 times, and she knew this, and she was very cute, very humorous in this, and she added a 30-pound weight to her butt up under her outfit. She did, just so he would have to at the top of the stairs. And to me, I just think that is just so funny. I mean, she knew, he gave her a rough time, and she gave it back to him. It's really kind of funny. And she really had that kind of little crisp spirit in her. And I think it was her gift, but I also think it was a part of her tragic ending.
Well, that's Veronica. What about Lynn? What was it about Lynn that you felt most comfortable in, or was it a struggle to get into her skin?
No, I think with me, it's really funny. After I did all the physical preparation for Veronica was actually easy to get into. That was one of the women. The Lynn Bracken character, because the Veronica Lake character is so crisp and so full of humor and wit and intelligence and intuitiveness. There was a transition there that was real funny when she had to drop the facade and become Lynn Bracken. It was more of a shaky, vulnerable, the girl from the Midwest who had come on a bus that she failed. She was a failure. She came out here to be a movie star, and she ended up being a high-class prostitute. I mean, there's a lot to play there emotionally. There really is. But I really had to play emotional tennis. And I was very lucky in that Curtis let me shoot a lot of this in sequence. So it was kind of wonderful. I got to sort of unravel this character as she unraveled, and as was meant to be. But on some days when I would have to flip back and forth, it was just a challenge. It was fun. I mean, I loved the challenge. I was very much up to it and looking forward to it, and consider this a tremendous opportunity for me.
What are your thoughts on 50s LA as well as the LA of today? Can you talk about those two different time periods?
Well, in a nutshell, nothing's changed. And I think this movie says that real clear. Nothing's changed. In fact, it may be even a little worse now, which is a sad statement, but I think I sat there when I saw this film, and at the end of the movie, when it said the end, I went, wow, my God, what we read in the paper, we're just showing you Curtis is just showing you in the 50s. What was going on then is still going on now.
In terms of police corruption, or in terms of all the politics, or?
Just all the factors. Let's just say, I always have a thing, the things God sees. I think there are things that go on that we couldn't even comprehend, really. A lot of evil on this planet, just a lot. And racism, and just a lot of sad things. We have to rise above it, but, I'll have to keep going on, but it's still the fact that they do exist. And that's one thing I do love about this movie is there's that missing gratuitous nature in it. There's no gratuitous anything in this, and I'm so proud of that, because I think there was a way to tell this story. He told this brilliantly. He took this material, which was, if you can unravel this, I think you can unravel anything. And in my opinion, the definition of a great director is great storyteller, and he tells this story so well. I was just mesmerized by it. But I was also very proud to be in this movie because it's so factual. I mean, even the blood and the crime and the everything is just what life is about. It didn't try to jam it down your throat. We have to give them one more. We have to shoot. We just have to do one more gunshot, one more this, one more that. There was none of that in it. It was very even. Even the sexual connotation in it, it was very sensual and very sexual without showing anything or being showy, or it just held itself back, and it let the truth come through, and I'm just so proud to be in the movie because of that.
Do you think being a mother has changed or will change your approach to acting at all, Kim, or is it a separate world from your career?
Well, my life is different, but it's all intertwined. I mean, I'm not someone that stays in character very long. I mean, Russell and Guy and the three of us, we had so much fun because we're just alike in that way. And we have pretty much the same approach when it comes to acting. I mean, when we're there in the moment, we're there in the moment, and 5 seconds later we could be, sitting over in the corner laughing about some football game. I mean, we're just that was the fun part of this movie. I fell so in love with everybody in it, and I've worked with some amazing actors. I've had some amazing co-stars in my life, and I would have to put Russell Crowe and Guy Pearce at the very top of that list. And they had someone ask me the other day, they're from Australia, and I think Australian men get a bad rap. They have this macho, misogynistic kind of image. I don't know what this is about, because these guys are as nice as they are talented. That sounds syrupy, but it's basically the truth. And And speaking of the baby, I brought the baby to the set with me every single day, and she would eat lunch with me and then play on the grass at Lynn Bracken's house, and Russell would come over, and it was just a real family affair. I was very, very melancholy when this whole experience was over. And to answer your question, if the baby has brought me anything in my life, and she's brought me so many things in my life, it would be clarity and freedom, because I think we all have, no matter what profession you're in, we're all insecure in some ways or have fears, and especially in this business. So all those little fears and insecurities, you have this little girl look at you, it's like God with flesh on trying to give you a message, like, now see how important all this little crap that you're going through, these little tiny fears and these little insecurities and these little things, they don't mean anything anymore. They are just, they're just popped. Those bubbles are popped, and they go away, and you really know the meaning of the word priority, and there's just, and you value time so differently, because there's just so little of it. And you turn around, and she's 2 in October, and I just had her yesterday, and she's just been a light. She's actually the one. I know this sounds weird, but she's actually responsible for me coming back to the screen, because I was in a very happy place, playing mom at home and watching Alec go down the hill in the car. Goodbye, dear. See you tonight. I really got into that mindset. I loved it. I loved waking up with her in the morning and taking her outside and showing her the trees and the helicopters and the planes, and this is grass, and I was really there. So it was really a message that I got really loud and clear it's almost like just subliminally in my mind, I just heard this. Mom, you have a responsibility to me, but you also have a responsibility to yourself, to take care of yourself and go back to the screen you love between action and cut, and it's time you go back, I think.
But does it change your decision-making process when you do? I mean, now that you are a mom, do you look at scripts differently?
Oh, I think you couldn't sit here and say you don't. Not that I'm ashamed of anything I've ever done, and I had someone ask me earlier, say, well, you share 9.5 weeks with your daughter. I'll share my entire life with my daughter. There are no lies here. There is no deception. And I'll share everything my husband has also done with her. So she will know all of us. She'll know everything that we've done. No secrets. I don't want that to be a part of my life. But as far as the decision-making process, sure, you do think, you might think of somewhat differently. Not a lot, but somewhat differently. I know that people ask me, is this my favorite role, whatever, and that's very difficult to answer because I've had some wonderful roles in my life. But people also say, when they ask me that, I said, I probably am most grateful for the role of Vicki Vale in Batman because of the effect it's had on people and children in general. So I've sort of had this connection with kids for a long time, with some of the movies that I've done, My Stepmother's an Alien, Blind Date, these kids, Cool World, they just, that's cool, man. I mean, so I've had relationships with the young and the older people from different eras, and that's always been a huge gift to me. So I think just in general, and especially since I've had the baby, but with or without the baby, I'm always sort of longing to do something that has some kind of effect on kids or something to do with children.
We interviewed Alec a little while ago, and he described you as Mark Twain in a dress.
Oh my God! Because somebody said, I don't know. Oh, because I think in an earlier interview, I think someone asked him if that's the way he described me. But I remember I read an interview he did years ago, and they said, when you marry, who do you want to marry? He said, I want to marry Ted Koppel in a dress. So he just, I'm Mark Twain now in a dress. Is that what I think he's referring to several things. One, because I write all the time, and that's what I do. I love to write. I love it as much as anything. But I also think that there's a little humorous side of Alec, and when it comes to when it comes to me, I think that he fell in love with me for the reasons people fall in love. I mean, I'm sure he loves me as a person and everything. But I think as a man, I think he really thought he might be getting in on the sex symbol thing a little bit, And after he marries me, he has looked at me so often in my life, and I've just found him looking at me. He says, "You are absolutely the most unfeminine girl I've ever known in my life." He said, "People do not know you." It's scary. Because I'm basically, what he means by that is I'm basically a tomboy. I mean, I basically am. He draws pictures of me. He's really a good artist. He draws these little pictures of me up in a treehouse all the time, because that's where I stay. I have this little treehouse in my house, and I draw, and I write, and I have my hair in a ponytail. Well, soon. Soon, and in my bib jeans, and I'm always barefooted, and that's who he's alluding to, I think, the Huck Finn sort of, figure.
What do you write? What kind of writing do you do?
I write a lot of stories. I write a lot of children's stories, basically for all of us, for adults as well, and I illustrate them in watercolors a lot. But I just write. I write all the time. It's very comforting to me, and I'd love to think of myself as this great Southern writer. I am not, but I love the South, and I'd love to someday go down and spend a lot of time in the South and write about what I love down there, my experiences as a child down there, and as a woman having come from there.
Have you been published?
No. You know what? It's really funny. I just write for me. I just write for me right now. I don't know. Maybe there'll come a time, but as long as I have these little... I get so excited when I write something that I think is really good. I get so excited. Nothing can make me more excited than that. I read and I reread it and go, wow, that came from someplace cool, put it over to the side. And I just get a thrill out of doing it for me, or for my daddy sometimes, because my daddy's a really wonderful writer. And we have this sort of pen, what do you call them, pen pals? We're sort of pen pals, my father and myself, in that way.
You mentioned not having a problem being in the moment and then coming back to reality while on the set and goofing around with Guy and Russell and all that. In a contemporary movie, I suppose that wouldn't be a problem, but in a period piece, when you pull yourself from the moment and you come back to life, come back to the real world, and there's your little 2-year-old daughter, and you're dressed up in full 50s femme fatale regalia, how goofy do you feel?
Well, let me say this. The baby would not come to me. We found that out. We went through that experience. She would not come to me when I first brought her to the set the first day, and I had on my makeup and the long platinum hair. I literally had to pull the hair back and had to wash all the makeup off her. She wouldn't come to me at all. And even she just didn't recognize those clothes were just so alien to her. She would not even come to me, and I got my feelings so hurt that I'd race this. The baby here's the baby here. Oh God! I'd just wash my face and everything. I mean, this little. She has so much power over Alec and myself. It's scary. It really is scary. And and the makeup and hair people, absolutely, and the body makeup girl, just all of them. Oh, the clothes. Oh my God, Ruth Myers. They all looked at me because I'm sort of a bull in a china shop in actuality. And Curtis knows this too. I mean, he said that he was looking for a piece of me walking, going back through some old footage. And I tripped in a couple of the takes, and he says, "There's my girl. That's the real girl." And I just call me Grace, right? So he knows me. He knows me really well. He said, "Here's this girl that dresses up in these dresses, and she's not at all, Hey, I just learned the walk. That's all. I just learned the walk.
Kim, you had such a lovely.
Had a Australian party. They had a lot of food, kangaroo, and what was the
shark?
Vegemite and shark. Did you go to a party? Did you have any of that?
No.
You missed that?
I think, yeah. I think that was I don't know where that was. Please count me out.
We are out of time, everybody.
The kangaroo. They had kangaroo?
You had a wonderful
Kill
entree
him.
into films based on your relationship with your dad and so on, and seeing films in the 40s and stuff. If you were going to do this all over again, do you think you would have pursued the same course? And if you had to advise someone who was just getting into the business, what do you think you might tell them?
First of all, I would tell them this. I would tell them, and no matter who they were, whether they know what they want or they don't know what they want, get an education first. Go to school. Do everything you can to graduate and go to school. Just get as much of an education as you can. It will help you in any profession, and just my experience in this business, it will help you tremendously. Go to school. Number one, if you want it, if you really want it, then you have to get experience. And if you don't want to go to college, if you don't want to whatever, then try some community theater. Try anything that will give you experience, and try to get into some kind of acting program, acting school, something that will give you some kind of experience. That's the whole thing, if you really want it. But we could sit here all day and talk about this, and I think the whole key to this too is you can't come to this town without really knowing that there are some major ups, but some major downs in everybody's life, really. And I think you have to come here with some kind of survivor tactics. You do, in some strange way, because it's not in any way. There are thousands of kids that come here every year on buses, and thousands of kids that end up going back to wherever they come to because the dreams do not come alive for them. Very few make it in this business, and those are facts, and that's reality. And I think equipped with that, if you still want to do it, if you still want it, and you're willing to go through what it takes to make it all, all the power to you.
Would you have done anything different?
I can't say that I would do a thing different. We've all make mistakes in our life, but maybe it's the mistakes that lead us, to the gifts that we need to go on. And that's kind of the way it's been for me.
We have to go now.
Not with her here. You can
That's
sit all day.
it. That's
It only gets worse, though, button pushing, and they get older. It only gets worse.
It's unbelievable. The game she plays.
But they don't call them terrible twos for nothing.
Oh, she is.
Are you going to have to relocate with Alec doing Macbeth?
With Alec doing what?
Isn't he doing Macbeth?
Yeah, we don't know how. It's a hard life to work out. Let's just put it that way, because it's a hard life to work out, to balance all this, because the baby is always with me, and I certainly don't want her to be away from her daddy for very long, because she loves him so, and he loves her back, and I would not.
Have you seen any of the rehearsals?
The rehearsals of Macbeth?
Yeah.
Oh, no, they have not started. I've seen The Edge, though, guys. Oh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have you seen it?
Yeah.
Oh, God, I loved it. I mean, I think he and Anthony together are great. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Your hair looks great.
Oh, no, honey, it's the film. We had to cut it all off, shave my head after the movie was over, so that's why it's still, my husband, after we cut it all off, he's just 2 weeks ago gave me my name back. He was calling me Jim Basinger up until then.
Why did they have to cut it all off? What?
The dye.
Oh, the dye.
We dyed it until it was just pitiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're back with Kim Basinger. Matt, do you have anything to say?
I just have one quick thing. She talked for a little while about how much she loved to write, and she said that she had never been published, that she did it just for herself. I did a little research trying to find out whether that has changed in the years since, and it doesn't look like it has. She still has not been published. She's still writing just for herself.
Yeah, and she seems, you can tell from the interview, she just, like you said, she loves writing so much, so hopefully that continued to light up her days. There's a brief mention of that Anthony Hopkins, Alec Baldwin film, The Edge, regarding the bear, which I still haven't seen. And
I saw it. It was all right.
It was all right. Yeah. They made a book on the making of The Edge as well. I forgot the name of the book. But that's
probably Living on the Edge. I'm just making that up.
Can you do me a favor from future episodes? Let's just mention some kind of not tangential reference to Aerosmith. I do like the Aerosmith callbacks and references.
That would be amazing. So if we're done with Kim Basinger, let's walk this way over to Guy Pearce.
Oh boy, here we go. He's
got some really sweet emotion, I think, in this interview.
These are funny asides from Matt Levitz. Guy Pearce, at the moment, I mean, this was the movie that turned him into I'm not saying bona fide star, but
yeah, because I don't know if he is one now, but he works a lot. We see him all the time, and he does some good stuff.
Yeah, he's a great character actor. I think the first time we did interview him, I don't know if you were at the table, was the Polaroid movie, the Insomnia. Not Insomnia. What was the one with the?
Well, you're talking about Memento, but that came after this.
See, I was my memory's shot.
Well, if you watch Polaroids. Memento, it's all in the wrong order. So actually, that was perfect.
But here's the thing: when you listen to the Guy Pearce interview, and at the moment, I remembered he did not really enjoy staying in Los Angeles for a while. I remember during the interview that he wasn't really at home, and you can kind of glean that from the interview. And
he's Australian, by the way.
Yeah, horses for courses.
I mean, aren't we all?
Aren't we all? But it makes sense that over 20 years later, a lot of his time has been spent making, like you were saying, solid dramas, solid films like The Rover. There's, like you were saying, Memento.
Memento is brilliant. It's one of my favorite films.
Memento's a brilliant film. He's made a lot of really great films, but he's made a lot of his films outside the Hollywood system, and I'm thinking a lot of the reasons why is because he does not like eat, sleep, and drink here in Los Angeles. He, like you said, would rather live in Australia and ply his trade there. So
yeah. Now, when he talks in this interview about corruption in the police department, remind yourself that this interview was recorded in 1997, because it sounds like he's talking about police corruption today.
Right.
It's kind of depressing to think how little it's changed.
Well, another enlightening, fun moment. I'm just going to pretend that you didn't say such a depressing thing as I look at a beautiful red rose out the window. Oh. And I'm thinking of great thoughts and beautiful, beautiful things as we segue into...
Well, I have one more.
Matt Levitz's insightful comment.
He's also going to talk about something called tall poppy syndrome. And with his accent, it sounds like he's saying tall puppy, but that would be a very different metaphor. I mean, I'm picturing a furry giraffe. But anyway, tall poppy syndrome is a common expression in Australia, but it's not so well known anywhere else. And it has to do with Australians' distaste for success. And I understand it's the same thing in England. They don't like for anyone to do too well in life or to become too prominent, and so they'll start to criticize them to bring their egos down to size. So imagine some of the poppies in your poppy field growing above the others, so you cut the tops off of those until all of the flowers are the same length. That's tall poppy syndrome. And now that you know we're talking about chopping the tops off of flowers, aren't you glad he isn't saying puppies?
Very good. Yeah, I am glad. That's a lighter note. We are now... I have nothing interesting else to say or ever, but maybe Guy Pearce does. Here is
maybe.
Guy. Yeah, maybe. Here is Guy. I'm Australian. Pearce.
I don't think that's part of his name.
Did you ride with the cops like Russell did, or did you go that far?
Yeah, we did. We only did it for a short period of time, though. I didn't find it to be overly valuable.
Didn't participate in any drug busts or...
No. I don't think they were going to allow us to do anything as detailed as that.
But there's a big gap between present-day LAPD and the 50s, isn't there?
Well, I should imagine there is. I mean, I'm sure it's developed and become particularly self-conscious. It was something I was interested in doing, but it just seemed to be extracurricular for me, you know.
So what did get you into that period and, you know, that character in that time then?
Reading the book. You know, the book was by far the most valuable source of research. Elroy has a particular view and angle on LA in the 50s and crosses that fact and fiction line quite nicely, I think. So, you know, that, like I say, was particularly valuable. There were other things that we read too, you know, some other books on early 50s police stories and this, that and the other.
How did you get involved with this film? Did you look at any old film noir?
Yeah, Curtis had us look at a couple of early films like Kiss Me Deadly and Private Hell 36. There was a few others as well. I can't actually remember what they were, but he really wanted to try and set the scene and establish a style for us to sort of work under.
How do you define that style? How did you latch on to it?
I don't know how I define it, and it's difficult. I've been asked this quite a lot recently, and you know, there's an element of repression, particularly with the character that I was playing, and almost a wooden sort of feel about the character, and I guess if I could have gleaned some of that from some of those films, then it was quite valuable. I always have a difficult time expressing what what I, how I worked out my research, etc. And defining that style, I'm not entirely sure about.
You have basically the lead in a cast with a lot of highly visible, experienced actors. Was that ever intimidating?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I've had the lead before in a number of other films, and obviously this was a particularly talented cast, and I think the enthusiasm that everyone had for this particular project evened it all out. We were all working towards the same thing, and the nice thing was that it was an ensemble piece, and each relationship was just as important as any other, and so we all felt very much like we were a team. Yeah.
How did you get involved with this film?
A fairly simple process. I read the script through my agent. I've been coming backwards and forwards to LA for the last couple of years, just spending a couple of weeks here at a time, and reading a variety of scripts and meeting a variety of directors and producers and casting agents, and LA Confidential was one of the scripts I was looking at the time. It was the start of last year, and a meeting was organised, a meeting was set up between myself and Curtis Hanson, and I read for him. And I was actually at the end of a 3-week visit, and I went back to Australia, I think like the next day or something. And a couple of days later, I was asked to come back and screen test, so I did. And lo and behold, I got the role.
Did you ever get the impression this might have been kind of a hard sell because the only thing we really know you for over here is an entirely different role than this one?
Well, no, I don't look at acting as, being based on the jobs you've done before, really. I mean, particularly from where I'm coming from. I mean, Curtis, in actual fact, hadn't seen Priscilla, and someone had said to him that I was the guy from Priscilla, and he wasn't interested in seeing it. It wasn't relevant to him, and I really admire that, because I often don't see the relevance in one role to the next anyway,
Well, in this country, that's unusual.
Yes, I'm sure. I mean, I understand that, names bring in price tags and bring in a certain amount of notoriety to a film or whatever. So I can see that. But in this case, it worked the way that I like to work, which is purely based on an audition or whatever. Yeah.
I feel like I've seen the three faces of Guy Pearce. I mean, the first time I saw you was in Priscilla, and then I saw you on the screen, and now I see you now, and they're like three completely different people. Is that something you pride yourself in? Are you okay with that? Is that part of a plan for you? Or?
I don't think it's part of a conscious plan. I mean, I'm fascinated with actors who are versatile and have a broad range of emotional extremes, I suppose. And I'm fascinated in a variety of lifestyle and so I think I get drawn to a wide variety of projects and characters. And not every character that I will play will be a sort of right out there on the edge, extreme, repressed, or obviously the character in Priscilla is completely overt. I mean, that was very much a departure for me as far as things that I'd done before. I mean, I've played fairly just straight down the line guys, modern day kind of characters, and I love the idea of versatility, and I love the idea of sort of stepping as far away from myself as possible in roles. I guess it's a disguise, or it's. I mean, when I watch an actor and I'm emotionally manipulated, and I watch someone who, like if you watch Dustin Hoffman, for example, and you can forget after 2 minutes that it's Dustin Hoffman, then great. I hate it if I watch someone and all the way through the movie I just go, well, yeah, I know that's meant to be a character, but gee, it's just Demi Moore to me. That's not necessarily a great example, but it's difficult, I think, when you look at actors and all you see is the actor all the time.
With that in mind, this is such a typically American film. Does that make the transformation even greater or even more?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, the accent obviously is something that certainly adds to that. The time period, the culture, playing a cop. I mean, I don't see that there should be any lines drawn as far as actors playing specific characters. I mean, I lie. There are, if you have a Chinese guy and he's playing an Italian, then there's something that's a little obvious, purely because of facial structure, etc. But I think if it's feasible, if your face lends itself to a variety of roles, then I don't think any lines need to be drawn.
What was the toughest part to do this?
I really don't know. I mean, none of it really seemed that tough, you know. Nothing was sort of so extremely difficult that I was struggling with it. But, you know, it was really important. I mean, the character goes on quite a journey. And I think it was important to maintain those sort of increments of change and make sure that they were done in such a way that didn't seem sort of ridiculously over the top or anything like that. And obviously you shoot a film out of order, and so you've got to sort of map this kind of stuff out early in the piece. It wasn't tough. It was something that I was enthused about. You know, it's great to have a character that grows and changes through the course of a story.
Did you do us on an interesting ride as the audience, because and when we first meet him, Exley is doing the right thing. We know what he stands for is right, but he is going against the characters that we've already become attached to because we like the other ones. They're more outgoing, they're more friendly. It's an interest. I think that when you talk about part of that journey, how do you gauge what the audience response is going to be to a character who is so?
Well, I guess by my own judgment, you know, I mean, I meet people every day, and I think we all judge people so immediately when we see people, and often we don't know why. One of the things I'm fascinated in life is how we judge people and why we judge them and for what specific little reasons we do. And I mean, Exley is someone, when I first read the script, I saw as particularly self-righteous and you know, incorruptible, and you know, he had such a narrow-minded perspective on things that it kind of annoyed me, you know, and so I wanted to make sure that I annoyed the audience as much when I played the character, so that the audience then felt that they had somewhere to go as far as eventually perhaps understanding this guy and going, oh, okay, I can warm to him and I can see where he's coming from, and you know, I like to think that that's perhaps a little inspirational, I guess. You know, because like I say, we all judge people pretty quickly at times, you know, and we walk away and say, oh no, they're pretty nasty and I don't want to have anything to do with them, when in actual fact it's because we just don't understand them and we're not prepared to give them the time of day.
You have a more emotional scene with Kim Basinger. What was it like to act with Kim?
Wondrous. She's a delightful lady. I mean, a particularly sensitive lady, and you know, someone who I've admired for a number of years, and I've felt for in a particular way because she's put on such a sexual pedestal. I mean, she's this sort of Hollywood sex god, and I should imagine that's a difficult thing to have to deal with. And you know, it was quite interesting for me to be doing the scene that I got to do with her, and to really delve into sort of some of her personality, I suppose, and how she deals with that. And she's a delight. I mean, she's a really delicate creature, and has a wonderful spirit. And we had kind of fun with it, you know. We had a laugh, and it's funny because she's such an obviously sexual creature in the film, and Exley is just not. He's like a plank of wood, you know. And so it's quite funny that these two kind of get it together.
How do you find Los Angeles today? Do you still think it retains some of that environment from the 50s, or
that facade?
Tell me about like this. Do you like this environment in LA?
I find it's a difficult place for me to deal with. I get, you know, particularly anxious in certain environments, and LA winds me up. You know, so you know, growing up in Australia, any sort of image of LA or Hollywood that I had was that of the glamorous movie icon, you know, movie star sort of image. And you know, coming backwards and forwards to LA in the last couple of years, I've begun to realise that that's not what it's all about, you know. I was surprised at how kind of dirty Hollywood seemed, and how overpopulated it was. The aggression is something that I find pretty prominent, you know. I mean, you could find yourself getting abused on any highway on any given day. The desperation of a lot of people clambering over each other to become the next, you know, Hollywood movie star is something that is pretty hard to deal with. So it's a tough town, and it's weird for me because I want to work as an actor, obviously. I mean, Hollywood is not sort of the be-all and end-all as far as work goes. I've worked relatively successfully in Australia for the last 12 years, and I'd like to maintain that. But I'm also fascinated with the work that's made here, and the amount of work that's made here. And so if I can sort of, I don't know. I mean, every day I question it. I'm sort of treading this fine line, and obviously I've been given this great opportunity to do this film, and it is a great film. For my first foray into American filmmaking, I feel pretty lucky about it.
What is it like, sitting in a screening with people who just really react to this movie in a positive way, and the great write-ups? I mean, it must be just an amazing feeling as an actor.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a great buzz for me. I feel so much for Curtis at the moment. I mean, he's just the happiest man in the world, and it's just. I mean, in the beginning, he had such a clarity about his vision and his perspective of how he wanted to tell this story, and I think he captured Elroy's sensibility really well, and to see the audience respond to Curtis's film like that is wonderful, and to be part of that for me is a great honour, and I mean. People compliment me on my performance, and I compliment Curtis on my performance. I mean, he's the one who kind of got me to do it. So it's a great buzz, yeah.
You've been doing this for 12 years, so when you started when you were 18?
Well, I started doing a lot of amateur theatre when I was 10. I grew up in a town called Geelong, and my mum used to take me to see these amateur productions, musicals and plays, etc., and I was drawn to that immediately and was on stage singing in pantomimes and musicals and all sorts of stuff when I was a kid. So it just sort of segued into television originally when I was 18 in a TV show at home, and then into film and more theatre, and it hasn't really stopped.
Was it easy to transcend that teen idol thing that happened when you were doing television at the age of 18?
It's a difficult thing to deal with, You're constantly questioning whether you're up there because of your talent or because of your cheekbones, and I'd like to think it's about the talent. I don't know. It's a hard thing to sort of understand, I suppose. I mean, I never went to drama school, so I guess I have an insecurity about that. And I guess a lot of drama school students have an insecurity about the popularity of particular actors because of TV shows they've been on. So we're constantly sort of, battling with each other in a funny kind of way. But we have a respect for each other too. It's like Ed and Bud, they're both searching for the same thing, and at the same time they're battling with each other, but they eventually get drawn together, And I end up working with actors who are incredibly trained, brilliant actors like Spacey, for example. But when you find someone that has a respect for what you do too, it kind of evens itself out. So
very often over here, the change can't be made. I mean, once you've got the handle teen idol, you don't make it into a respectable film. I just wondered if it was different over there, if they're a little bit more lenient, if they're a little bit more understanding.
I think in a way it's the same, It sort of depends on who you are and how good you are and what you've done in what TV shows. I mean, we can sort of generalise and say that someone from a soap can't work in movies. I mean, I've been pretty lucky. I worked on this Australian TV series called Neighbours for 4 years, which is an evening soap. It's a nighttime soap, But then while I was doing that, I was doing films at the same time. So I was pretty lucky. But for some people, it just doesn't work for them. It just doesn't happen. Yeah.
How important is making it in Hollywood to you? Where does that sit on your list of priorities?
It's important to me, I suppose, to be accepted as a good, strong, versatile actor. When I kind of do the making it in Hollywood thing, it makes me cringe a little bit, because it feels like people talk about this sort of dream, this dream that they have, and I kind of, I don't know, it's a difficult thing to sort of understand. I mean, I'd like to work everywhere. I'd like to work all over the world and continue to do so and continue to do versatile projects. I understand that Hollywood is this incredible machine that is sort of pumping away, and if you get into it, you can't be sort of half in and half out. You've got to sort of get right on in there, So I'm not sort of sure what I think about that.
Your character, he starts as a Boy Scout and he incorruptible, and in the end he comes around to playing the game the way it's successfully played. Is there a certain point where he makes that transition, or is he a political animal from the very beginning?
I think he's a political animal from the beginning. I think he's particularly narrow-minded. He has a very narrow-minded perspective on things, and he's running on fear, and he's fearful of the physicality of the police force and fearful of Bud White's way, the way that he works, etc. And he's hiding behind that. Well, he's hiding behind his intellect. He's using his intellect to to feel superior, and that's got to break down at some point or other. So there's a variety of moments through the film that I think open his eyes, and that where the glasses come off, obviously. I think in a sense his political animalness comes from that intellect, that safety zone that he has. And I think at the beginning, there's no question about it. He seems so pure about his direction, and then right towards the end of the film or whatever, it just becomes one big ambiguity for him. He must question why he's even become a policeman in the first place, and whether or not that is a justifiable occupation for him. After riding with the cops and playing one in another era, do you have a sense of the police as from... I kind of do. I mean, I've got friends at home that are cops as well, and it was something that I was pretty fascinated in when I was a kid. And then once I thought about it really deeply, I saw the potential of your own personal growth as being rather restricted as a policeman, because I don't get the whole thing of feeling like you can put a badge on and say I've got more power than you and I can judge you, and I feel justified in that. I don't. I feel like I'm a really judgmental person, and I personally want to understand why I feel like that, and I think being an actor helps me understand that a lot more. I think, I'm generalising, of course, but a lot of cops that I've met, they're really struggling with something, and I don't think they know exactly what it is they're struggling with. They're searching for this sense of justice, and they do it by playing out being a copper, and I don't know that they're going to find the answer to that by doing that. If that makes sense.
Was there ever talk of a Priscilla 2, and also... Is there a recovery period after that for you?
I'm still going to therapy now. There was no official talk. I mean, a lot of people talked about the idea of a sequel, and I immediately sort of cringed at the concept of it. Not only because once I've played a character, I find it difficult to have to go back and do it again, But I think with Priscilla particularly, they went on such a specific journey, They really, the fact that it's a road movie is such a sort of metaphor for that, obviously. And where do you go after that? You could do the drive home again, but I like the idea of leaving an audience or having an audience feel like they want more, after seeing something. And I don't think giving them more is necessarily the answer to that, It's like the paparazzi that kind of say, well, it's what the public wants, so let's just give it to them. I mean, it's a really sort of... It doesn't sit with my kind of attitude, I don't think,
Certainly no regrets in doing it, though.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, it was one of the greatest experiences of my life, and I stepped into an area that allowed me to express something that I felt really inspired by, and I felt like we inspired a lot of people because of that, and it was by far one of the most amazing experiences of my life to work on that film. And I mean, I don't have any regrets about anything that I've done, really. I mean, there's things that I've done that haven't quite worked, but ultimately I look at them and try and work out why they didn't work and say, okay, well, it's a lesson and I've learned and I'll move on,
What's the Australian phrase? Is it the tall poppy syndrome?
The tall poppy syndrome, yeah.
Are you gonna, being in a big American movie now, are you gonna go back down under and face that?
Probably. No, I don't know. I mean, I've tried to analyse this tall poppy syndrome now for a number of years, because when you're on the up and up, for want of a better expression, you're fearful or you're aware of that, and I think a lot of people who work their way up the ladder, for example, of popularity or stardom or whatever term you want to use, ultimately the ones that become victims to the tall poppy syndrome, I think, are the ones who have a bit of a negative attitude about it, or sort of brag about it a bit, or something like that, I mean, there's the Judy Davises and Mel Gibsons and Sam Neil's of the world, who are brilliant actors and who are seriously on the top of the ladder, but they're not victims to the tall poppy syndrome. So, and they're very talented people who are really striving for the craft and have a personal need to express what it is they're expressing, and that's how I feel about work. So I'm aware of it, but I don't feel sort of worried about it really anymore.
What's next for you?
I don't know. I'm I'm just looking for a job, you know. I'm reading a lot of stuff, and there's been a couple of offers and things that we've sort of turned down, and there's a couple of things that I'm pretty interested in, and now we just have to convince those people that I'm the man for the job.
What kind of stuff are they sending you?
Oh, anything you can possibly think of. You know, I mean, this is just my agent, obviously, who's got his sort of finger on the pulse, and you know, is particularly aware of everything that's going on in Hollywood, for example. And it ranges from, you know, period pieces about you know, a guy that's struggling with life and this, that, and the other, to sort of modern day action things that I'm not particularly interested in, and you know, so there's a whole variety of stuff. And I really don't know what I want to do next. Once I read it, I'll kind of know.
But action isn't part of the game.
Well, not mindless action movies. No, not at all.
I think it's interesting in the case of L.A. Confidential that the two main characters, these very American characters, are being played by Australians or Australian-trained actors. Do you think it's easier, or did you find it easier to get into the frame of mind of an American in the 50s than perhaps an American actor might have had?
I don't know. I mean, we'd have to sit down with American actors and nut that out, I suppose. I'm sure some American actors would have a hard time doing that, but it's like when we did Priscilla and they kept saying, why are there three straight guys playing these drag queens? And we're saying, well, I don't know. I don't think what our personal lives have any relevance to the character necessarily. You know, I think as long as a person you're able to tap into what the sort of strengths and weaknesses are of a character, and if you're obviously able to get away with the accent, etc., then that's what sort of counts. I don't know. It's hard, I think, to be specific about that because you're always sort of going to generalise.
Had you ever worked with Russell before?
No. I'd met Russell a couple of times, and I'd been quite a fan of his work for a number of years. Was particularly aware of his body of work. I mean, Russell's done tons of films, you know. But no, we'd never actually worked together.
Because it seems ironic to come 10,000 miles to
to work together.
Somebody you probably live in the same city with.
Well, no, he lives in Sydney. I live in Melbourne. So yeah, but it is rather ironic, I guess.
And then you guys got into some trouble there. I mean, you were prankstering around with your party and your Vegemite and your guessing tablets.
Right. Did Russell tell you about that? Yeah, we put on a party for the crew, an Australian party. Yeah, just to give them a taste of, you know, of what we're like at home, I guess.
So with LA Confidential coming out, are you going to stay in LA for a while just to see what's going on with?
Yeah, I'll stay for a little while. I'll stay for a couple of weeks. I'll go home for the opening of the film in Australia at the end of October, or the middle of October, and then I'll sort of just see what happens. Then I may come back and continue with the meetings here, or there's a couple of things at home that are coming up as well. So I just need to choose. I'm a Libran, so choosing is a difficult thing for me.
Will Australian audiences be surprised seeing the two of you, who they know so well from television and film, playing Americans in an American movie?
Yeah, I think they probably will. I had a screening of the film at home for like 25 friends. The distribution company at home allowed me to do this, and you know, so we had some close friends, and a couple of my wife's sisters were there, and you know, we invited them along to this thing, and they watched it, and at the end they said, well, you know, we knew you'd sort of had this part in this American movie, but we didn't kind of realise that you were the guy left standing at the end, you know. It's pretty cool. So yeah, I think there's probably an element of surprise about it, yeah.
So you'll be here for your birthday in a couple of weeks then?
Quite possibly.
Any perspective on turning 30?
No, not really. I mean, I like getting older. You know, I really do. I always feel within myself that I become a bit more respectful of myself as I get older. And as a kid, I always wanted to be 35. I always thought 35 was a good, strong, solid, sort of manly kind of age, you know. So 5 years to go, and I'll be really happy.
You must know that people come out of this movie saying, Guy Pearce, your name is on a lot of lips when they walk out of the screening room. I mean, are you beginning to feel that buzz?
Yeah, I mean, you know, ever since Cannes, the festival in France, people have been saying some fairly gracious things, and it's sort of wonderfully flattering, and I'm aware of it. Yeah.
Did you know that you'd aced it on the set when you were doing it?
Not really. I guess when you're sort of surrounded by the likes of Russell and Kevin and all those guys, you kind of, even though I didn't necessarily feel intimidated by them, I was pretty in awe of what they were doing the whole time, and really just concentrating on what I was trying to do and make sure I sort of hit the nail on the head. And if I did that, that's great. It's a hard thing to sort of appreciate, I suppose.
You guys had this little party and stuff like that, and Danny can be a bit of a wild man as well. And Kevin's kind of nutty too. I was wondering if anyone joked with anyone, or there was running gags or things that people did, and if Danny was being his crazy self.
Well, I really didn't work. I'm really boring when it comes to this kind of knowing about this kind of stuff, and particularly because of the character that I was playing, I stayed fairly much away from any partying that may have been going on, because Exley's very much a loner, and in many ways I kind of feel the same way. I'm not sort of one of the guys, so I don't really know. I was just concentrating on what I was sort of trying to do, and I really didn't work with Danny. I only had one scene with Danny, and my character was unaware of him being in the scene. It's when I'm rolling around on the floor with Kim and Danny's in the closet taking photographs of us, and so he was pretty funny on that day, being rather envious about what I was getting to do.
What was
bad luck, Danny?
What was the shootout like? What was it like to do that whole scene at the end?
That was pretty exciting. It was a moment. It was something that I was really conscious of not becoming sort of too over the top. I was saying earlier to someone that one of my pet hates is watching movies when there's machine gun fire and bullets going all over the place and people just don't get hit. So I was pretty conscious of it, trying to make it work. But it was pretty exciting as well. To have the money, obviously, that sort of American studio films have for the amount of special effects or explosives that they work with, that's a fairly eye-opening experience. And of course, we shot it bit by bit by bit by bit by bit, so it certainly didn't instill the sort of adrenaline that one gets when they watch the finished scene.
How about the scene when Russell's knocking you around the office?
Yeah, he knocks me around, doesn't he? Well, that too was a great scene to do. The choreography of that was obviously fairly crucial, and I think Russell and I work really well together as a team in that sense. Russell's a pretty strong guy, and I'm a pretty light guy, so I don't think it was sort of too difficult. But I'm fairly flexible and fairly physical, so. I didn't sort of come out too damaged or anything.
Did you like Exley, and is that necessary?
Well, as I said before, I was pretty judgmental of him in the beginning. So I guess my more immature or childlike perspective on Exley would be that I didn't like him in the beginning. But that definitely allowed for a dynamic, for a change. There was then the potential to like him towards the end of the film, or to understand him and feel for him. And no, it's not important for me to like the characters that I play. I think I've got to be able to understand them, and ultimately I like anyone that I play by the time I finish doing it, because I feel like I've understood a bit more about them. It helps me be less judgmental of people.
You talked about how Danny's reaction to you doing that scene with Kim Basinger. What was your wife's reaction? She and her sisters when they saw the film. Did you talk about that at all?
Oh yeah, she was. She was pretty cool about it. She's pretty sort of fine, and we're pretty confident with each other. So there's no sort of drama there, I don't think. Unless she hides it really well. Maybe you need to talk to her about it.
What was your wife?
More important is Alex's reaction.
What was?
I don't. She, she'll give me a bit of a friendly whack or something like that. But but no, she's sort of fine with it.
If the tables were turned.
If the tables were turned, yeah. I mean, maybe I'd be more envious or jealous than she would be. But she was down on set quite often, and once you see the workings of the mechanics of a film being made, it's so sterile in that sense. That I guess she knows that any emotions that were felt were purely through the character and weren't really.
We've talked to married actors before who've said that they just can't watch the other one doing that.
Right.
They can't watch. John Travolta's one. He says he won't watch his wife doing this.
Well, and I guess it depends. I mean, it's not like we were sort of buck naked rolling around in bed together. It was a pretty awkward, odd sort of comical scene, and so I don't think it caused too much drama.
You have to tell me what her reaction was to seeing you in drag.
Well, that was actually before we've been friends for a number of years, and we went to school together, and she's seen me do lots of rather odd things. So she sort of was like, oh yeah, there he goes again, doing something pretty strange.
Did she give you any pointers?
No.
You her?
No, I don't think that would be such a good idea for me to do that.
We're going to end right there.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much.
Nice job in
Oh,
this.
here we go.
The movie's really good.
Thanks.
Excellent.
Can I get you to sign this for me?
Yes, certainly.
We all thought that you didn't do the press for Priscilla because you didn't want to have to be quizzed about being in drag all the time.
Oh well, I missed the Cannes Film Festival. No, I was busy I was stuck doing this bloody TV show in Australia, so I didn't get the chance to.
Is TV a thing of the past now for you, or have you left that behind you?
Not necessarily. I mean,
Before
I guess
that away, could you do this one too?
I don't really want to get stuck in a long-running TV series again. I'd rather continue with film. I just like the variety. But
is it the same thing down there that if you sign for a series, you're pretty much locked for 5 years, and that's?
Well, no. I mean, I was, because the last series that I did was an American co-production. The Man from Snowy River was a Disney Family Channel co-production thing, or Family Channel co-production. But no, most things at home, I don't think they'll sign you for 5 years because, they don't have the confidence that they're going to go that long.
Thanks. Nice meeting you.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Great film. Who do you have now?
Great film.
Kim.
Curtis. No, Kim is in an hour.
Actually, 27-year-old Matt, Kim Basinger is not in an hour. We've already listened to that interview because we're listening to them out of order. What can I say, Matt? I'm older and wiser than you are. Someday you'll be me, if you're lucky.
Out of order? That sounds like a radio program as well.
Really?
Yeah, it does. It was a radio program back in the day, I think.
So Guy Pearce said that he didn't know what he was going to be doing next. He was reading scripts. The next couple of years were actually kind of slow for him. He did a few small films that my guess is you've never heard of. Greg, you probably have, but anyone listening has not.
No.
Including the cannibal movie Ravenous.
Or Ravenous.
Sure.
Yeah, either or.
But then he came back strong 3 years later in 2000 with Memento and Rules of Engagement with Tommy Lee Jones and Samuel L. Jackson, directed by William Friedkin.
Very cool.
So that's all I've got. You got anything?
The one movie of his that there's a recent movie that he did a couple of years back called The Spinning Man, not The Spinning Man. I sound like I said The Spinning Man. It's called The Spinning Man. It's a detective thriller where he plays.
I don't know that one.
It's a small film, but it stars Guy Pearce, and it's relevant, I suppose. But he was a college professor who is implicated in the murder of a girl of one of his students in college, and Pierce Brosnan is the detective assigned to figure out if Guy Pearce's character is a killer. So that was an interesting movie called The Spinning Man.
So I guess now we can move on to Russell Crowe. We've got a half hour with Bud White himself. Now, prior to LA Confidential, Russell Crowe had done a lot of acting in Australia, and he was just beginning to make a name for himself in the U.S. with prominent roles in Romper Stomper, The Quick and the Dead, and Virtuosity. And by the way, we interviewed him for all three of those, and I personally found him at the time to be friendly and good-natured. It was kind of fun to interview. Superstardom would not come for another few years, with his Oscar-nominated turns in The Insider and A Beautiful Mind, and his Oscar win for Gladiator. This interview catches him just prior to that. He's a serious working actor here, but he hasn't felt that harsh glare of the spotlight yet.
He was getting there, and here's the thing. When you listen to this interview, there is going to be weird references to Because he was nice, but there were times from my own recollection of interviewing him, especially with Virtuosity, he was a bit difficult. He's a guy who does not suffer fools. I distinctly remember there were a couple of people who asked stupid questions. It's not you, Matt. It's not me. And he would give them a very candid answer and maybe just not be a fan of that question, or I don't know, maybe not that person. Eventually,
I can understand that. I mean, we sat in enough rooms with people asking stupid questions. I could see getting frustrated with that.
Right, and he's a guy who doesn't suffer fools. So when you listen to this interview, there is going to be a little bit of a reference about how he's more relaxed. What's more interesting is I remember at the time of LA Confidential, I was a little bit intimidated going into the interview.
Really?
But this was the first time from my recollection, you and I have different recollections, when he actually appeared really chummy and cordial with everyone. And maybe you said before he was friendly before, but I remembered distinctly this time it was on a much different level because, to your point, Matt, he had known us for several previous junkets, and there was a time when they were talking about the time schedule situation. I think they were referencing the junket to Virtuosity, which from my recollection wasn't. It was a catch as catch can with Russell Crowe, and maybe that was why at that moment it was a little bit rough during that interview. And
I have a different memory of the Virtuosity junket.
Interesting.
I have a very specific memory of him talking about how doing junkets was sort of like being a performing monkey.
Oh, right. Yes.
And there was a plate of candy in the middle of the table, and Kathy Kogan grabbed one at the end of his answer and threw it to him and said, "Good answer. Here's your reward." And he just cracked up. And I remember him just really letting loose and like tears going down his face. He was laughing so much, and it was really endearing, and it was a fun moment, and we all just liked each other.
I just remember that moment. That moment did happen. And guess what? Maybe I was just being a little bit too dark. Maybe my memory is not as good, just like the Guy Pearce segment. Maybe my memory is rough, very rough. And Rough Magic, brilliant segue, Greg, by the way. Rough Magic is another movie that he talks about in this interview. It's a little spoiler alert, but we will get back to Rough Magic. But
right, and he also talks about Breaking Up, which came out that same year and co-starred Salma Hayek. And he talked about Heaven's Burning, which is a movie that I have not heard of. And Rough Magic with Bridget Fonda, which had come out and bombed 2 years earlier. So all these movies that have not really survived too well in the public consciousness, they're not really remembered well. And certainly when you think about his oeuvre, you don't think about those films. But at the time, they were, part of what he was doing. So he talks about all that stuff. He also swears a little bit. I like to give language warnings. There's one here. That's all I've got. Greg, you got anything else?
I have one more thing, little teaser. If you want to know, Matt always talks about time and place. At that time and place, if you want to know his insights and thoughts of Los Angeles, specifically downtown Los Angeles, you're going to hear it here. And I'm not going to say what I usually say. Here is Russell Crowe.
That is what you usually say. You say that all the time. I can't get you to stop saying, "Here is Russell Crowe."
Russell Crowe, here we go.
It really confuses everyone around you when they look around going, "Where's Russell Crowe?" And you're just, "No, he's right here."
And
he isn't. It's a lie.
All right. And do without much further. Here we go.
Russell Crowe?
Russell Crowe.
How you doing? I'm Russell.
Hi, Bobby.
Hi, Bob. We've
Good to see you. Yes, we have.
Hey.
We've spoken before.
Cool. What's that?
Matt?
Hi, Matt.
Chef Morgan.
Hi,
Nice to
Chef.
meet
How you doing?
Russell.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Wait, I thought you would
How you
remember.
doing? Alan.
This isn't going to work if you're tied up.
You're just trying to waste
You're gonna have to meet me halfway.
The table can't take this pressure.
Okay.
Hey, man. Cool.
You just wave.
I like Russell.
Hi, I'm Mari. Nice to meet you.
Oh, nice to see you again. Oh, yeah.
Gail Murphy. People must tell you all the time you look just like Eddie Van Halen.
You do. Or not.
No, they actually tell
Don't take that personally.
You do.
Hello. How you doing? Are you in the right room?
Yeah.
That's right. How you doing? I can see you guys couldn't give that much of a shit. You see, you try and be personal and Eddie Van Halen, oh my God. For a start, he's about 90 years old, for Christ's sake. Wasn't he born before they invented the electric guitar?
Perhaps.
I don't know. All right, so you're a fan of Eddie Van Halen, so he's sorry.
Are you ready for their visibility? That this,
Have we started, have we?
Yes, indeed.
We're all plugged in? All ready to rock?
This would be a question.
Hello, out there in Radioland.
Eddie Van Halen, take one.
Could possibly up your visibility quotient quite a bit here in the States. So how do you feel about that?
Well, that's not necessarily something that concerns me with any great level, you know. I mean, I just get about and do my job, mate, go down to the salt mines, and if it turns out okay, that's fine and dandy, you know. It's the same as, you know, I've spoken to a lot of you guys, you know, at various points, you know, it's the same attitude, it hasn't changed, you know. I tend to, every time I do one of these junkets, there's a whole lot of smoke gets blown around the room and in and out various orifices, you know, and I just kind of take it on that level and get about doing my job, you know.
Well, speaking about this particular salt mine, the film Noir genre, was it one comfortable to slip into, the whole mood of it?
I had a lot of fun with this, you know. For a start, I've got a director who is an incredibly strong ship's captain, you know. And as we know, the vagaries and foibles and quirks that come about in filmmaking, it's not very often you get a guy who does know actually how to navigate a rough sea, you know, and get to the place that he wants to go. Generally, you kind of end up making Christopher Columbus type movies, you know, where there was an intention, but you didn't necessarily get there, but hey, we'll make the best while we're here, you know. But Curtis had a very strong vision right from the beginning. He sent me a series of 7 photographs, and if I could lay them out for you now, you would one and all say, yeah, this is the movie, you know. Character, very specific, evocative of the music he was going to use, the way he wanted to shoot the film, and the type of LA he wanted to personify it as a character in the movie. So it was, for me, a very, I step off from using the word satisfying because nothing I ever do is satisfying. You know, I prefer a kind of an uneven ground, and I'm very harshly critical, self-critical. But it was a good experience. You know, I was working with people who allowed the 2 main points of filmmaking to come through, and that's detail and collaboration.
You rode with some LA cops, didn't you? Or
yeah, a couple of times.
What was that like?
It was kind of interesting to a certain point, but you know, I think the LA Police Department is very used to having the spotlight on them. You know, being the city that LA is in the center of the film industry, they have been using film as a medium to promote themselves and to teach their new recruits since the 40s, you know, so there's a lot of that stuff that we actually got to have a look at. But riding with the contemporary cops, you know, and I'm saying this with a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, you know, they can't help but tell you what their lives are like, you know, and that's only useful to a certain point because in 1953 the differences between being an LAPD cop in 1996 are massive, you know. You're dealing with the precinct maps being redrawn, you're dealing with a different set of radio calls. There was no Miranda rights didn't exist in 1953, and the relationship between the police department and the community was vastly different, you know, and, you know, down to available weaponry. 1953, 2-inch, 4-inch, 6-inch, 38 caliber pistols, Colt or Smith & Wesson, full stop, you buy your own gun and you clean it, you know. 1996, when we made the film, 97 now that we're talking about it, the weaponry that is available for your use as a policeman is vastly different, but that reflects the weaponry available to the criminal element as well, you know.
Did you meet the 90s version of the Kevin Spacey character, the showbiz liaison?
I met one guy that had a lot of medals. I think his first name was Randy, which is probably the 1990s version of the Big V. And I've got, you know, having said all that, let's just take it on another tack for a minute. The respect and admiration I have for anybody in any city in the world who carries a badge and is part of the law enforcement community is very high, you know. It's not a job that I would ever do. It's not a situation I would ever want to find myself in. Acting the role is a different thing altogether.
Why is it so hard to find a film as unique as LA Confidential, where the filmmaker sticks to his or her vision throughout the entire process?
Well, that's the way the studio system is set up now. You have a whole lot of people who are paid to tell the guy who knows how to make movies how to make his movies, you know, and who he should be using in his films. And the unique part of this experience for all of us is Arnon Milchon as a filmmaker and a film financier. You know, Arnon's been involved in feature films since Last Tango in Paris, and he's made some great films. You know, he made Time to Kill, Heat. They're just a couple in the more recent of his films, and he believes in the filmmaker. Curtis gave him a 15-minute presentation, and he said, "Okay, let's make the movie." And Curtis says, "Yeah, really? On sort of what grounds and how many pounds of flesh and what limb do I lose?" But he's not like that as a man. And once he's made that decision, he will support the filmmaker through the process.
This film is so Americana. This noir is so Americana.
Might as well jump.
I know it's your job. What's the biggest adjustment you had to make? Oh, by the way, could you play something before the end of the interview? But anyway, what was the biggest adjustment you had to make as an actor, coming from such a different background?
Same adjustment that you always take into playing a role. You just try and steep yourself in the time period and the attitudes of the person, and learn your dialogue.
Preferably with an American accent, right?
Well, this is an LA-specific accent. I have a dialect coach by the name of Jessica Drake, and this is, again, another first, and this is the first time that I've used a dialect coach right throughout the process, as opposed to having to jam it into a certain area. And I've also learnt, through the course of the 6 movies I've done in America, what I need to do in terms of learning the accent, and concentrate in the pre-production rehearsal period on, I liken it to if you're going to go on a holiday to France, and you get the tapes out, Je m'appelle Jean Clooney, bonjour Janine. I was actually wondering if Jean Clooney was related to George, but I found out that they're not. That was only recently, though. You just learn a whole lot of words and phrases and you put them into your head, But when at a certain point you take them out of the frontal lobe, you deal with the internal life of the character, and if you've done the work in the pre-production, you have maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds of conversation with the dialect coach about vowels and consonants, if and when it's needed.
Your character, I'm sorry, at the end, you're shot point blank.
3 times, 38 caliber.
How did you survive? I mean, was there a debate about whether or not your character would make it?
The only thing that we changed with that is we lessened the amount of bullets. Bud White actually took, when we shot it, and in the book, I think it's 5 slugs. We made it 3. No vital organs. If you look, this is the key. Captain Dudley Smith is wearing a pair of gloves when he shoots the gun. You look at the difficulty he has when he cocks the pistol. You see? Ha ha! Bud lives.
You mentioned the book just a moment ago. How was that important to you, or did you stay away from the book in preparing?
No, the book is really important, and I think the great thing about working with Curtis is that, you got a film director who is intelligent and sensitive enough to want to preserve the original voice of the writer of the book, and they have forged a respect and a friendship, James and Curtis. I mean, normally when you're going to go into principal photography, the novelist, when in terms of Hollywood movies, is feeling somewhere between bludgeoned, steamrolled and raped, and not in that good a mood for the process about to come. But here we're now doing the umpteenth week of press, and we've done, we started, I think, together in Cannes in May, and we've basically, in our own ways, been doing long lead magazines and all this sort of stuff. It's been a continuous process, and we're together again in Toronto. We've got the novelist promoting the film because he believes in the film. He sees it very simply. He says, hey, it's my book, but this is Curtis Hanson's film. And for whatever initial trepidation he may have had when it came to the point of somebody was going to make a movie out of LA Confidential, he's beyond that now, He sees it as a totally separate art form, and he's really respectful of the work that Curtis has done. James sees it very cleanly and evenly, and that, I think, has been a great help, to Curtis as well, because of that division. My book, your film. We were at Toronto the other day, and this is going to get a little bit blue, so you might have to edit this a little later on, because I'm going to quote James Ellroy, people. I'm going to talk the demon dog talk. We're in Toronto. We're doing the press conference. Someone says, "So James, after this experience, do you now wish that you could direct a movie?" I mean, that's basically the kind of, and most novelists are going, "Yes!" But James says, "No, I don't want to direct a movie." He says, "No, come on, do you want to direct a film?" And James says, "No, I'm a novelist first and foremost. That's what I do. I write books." And the guy says, but James, how do you know that you don't want to direct a film until you've directed a film?" And Elroy says, "Well, pal, I've never fucked a porcupine either."
Now, I read an article.
Come on, laugh it up. Laugh. I know you're all protecting the microphone, but this guy is unique and original. And I did say it was going to get a bit blue, so I did warn you. I'm sorry.
He actually, James Elroy talked in an article about casting Kim Basinger as your opposite in a pair, and he noted in the article how much older she looked than you, and he said that this.
Who are we talking about, James now or Curtis?
No,
All right.
in New Times. Actually. And he said this was brilliant casting because in the dynamic of that relationship was a mother-son. There was an element of mother-son relationship. How much did you work with that on the set with Kim?
We didn't have to work with it. We didn't have to emphasize it in anything that we were doing because I think from just the reality, the facts. She's a little older than I am, and she happens to be an extremely warm and giving person, as well as a very fine actress, and we have the scenes to play. They're on the page, That initial interrogation scene between the two is a great dance. It's a wonderful dance, and Kim Basinger has a brilliant spatial instinct and a wonderful sense of rhythm, 2, 3, 4. Let's do it again, Kim.
So you have Kim in this one and Salma Hayek in Breaking Out. This has got to be why you got into movies.
Well, it's a good byproduct, me old mate. Yeah. Salma, again, I think Salma is sort of disrespected at this point in time and seen as being just hugely ambitious. But her intelligence matches her ambition, and her talent and instinct do as well. And I think when people see Breaking Up, it's a very uncomfortable movie, Breaking Up. It's seen as they're trying to sell it as a romantic comedy, but this is the death throes of a long-term relationship. That sort of situation doth not a romantic comedy maketh. This is a brutal and uncomfortable movie about these two people who are in love but just can't stand each other. And Salma actually does. One of the favourite lines I've ever had an actress do in front of me in terms of, and I've made 18 movies, I've worked with lots of people. The situation is, we live in New York, that's where the movie's set. We haven't seen each other for a while, we've been apart, but we've come back together for one of those nights of lust, as you'll want to do with your ex-lovers, I suppose because it's a lot simpler. So we've been together, and halfway through the night, I just got to get out of there. My character's just got to leave. It's like, uncomfortable. I'm feeling like so enclosed and squished up. So, I get out of bed and I'm trying to find my shoes and my socks and my bits and pieces in the dark, and make my exit. And she wakes up and catches me, and says, "What are you doing?" So now I've got to explain to this woman that I supposedly love why I'm trying to sneak out of her apartment at 3 o'clock in the morning. And, I don't know how I would go necessarily, but the character I was playing didn't give a very good explanation. So the tirade begins, and it finishes with the line, "Just for once in my life, I would like to get laid and have a good night's sleep." She was brilliant, she was wonderful to work off,
You and Guy were the two Aussies on the set, so were you throwing a shrimp on the Barbie or whatever?
Oh, mate, we gave the crew a little bit of fun. Because of the hours we were doing on this film, we went to grace time every single day. That means that, for those of you that don't know, that the crew has to be asked if it's okay for them to, take a shot into the normal lunch period. And so we would do kind of a lot of things during the course of the shoot. We had a lot of Australian candy sent over, things that Americans hadn't seen, like little milk bottles and things like this. That you're supposed to eat, and so we were doing little things like that, and Freddo frogs and all these things that we have down there for killing your teeth. But then we put a party on for them. The main centerpiece of it was Australian food. We had kangaroo steaks and shark and meat pies, my mother's recipe, which the caterer totally screwed up. But his intentions were good, But when we make a pie, we have a savoury pastry. We don't have a sweet pastry, and he kind of made a sweet pastry, and I was like, anyway. But we also had some things brought over, like Vegemite, and we had these T-shirts made for the crew that said, "I've been graced by Exley and White. I'm a happy little Vegemite," and on the back, which was the saying on the back of the T-shirts, it said, "Vitamin B enriched vegetable protein tastes like shit." So we gave him a very, very Australian experience during the course of the shooting. We also brought in these things, a product called Barocca, which is a vitamin B, basically a hangover cure. You know, if you're staying in an Australian hotel, you know, in the minibar, you know, you've got like the little packet of nuts and the chips and all that sort of stuff. Well, in an Australian hotel, you also get a tube of Barocca, because if you're from overseas, you're probably not used to that volume of alcohol. So we try and look after the tourists, you know. So, but it says very clearly on the outside, I mean, these pills are like this big. It says very clearly that this is an effervescent drink, that you get, you know, 8 to 10 ounces of water, and you drop the horse pill in it, and, you know, when it's all finished effervescing, then you should consume it. The amount of times we had guys running towards us with orange foam pouring out of their mouths, it was like we'd planned it, and we really hadn't. We'd given it to an adult. You can read, you know, can't you? Yeah, well, there's the tube, and mate, it was, you know, we've laughed about it so many times because we couldn't have done anything funnier, you know.
You have Heaven's Burning coming out soon, too.
Yeah. Should I give you a little bit of an idea of the plot of Heaven's Burning? Well, firstly, let me say that when I got into Heaven's Burning, I was making it as the social, political statement that I thought the writer intended to make. Somewhere along the line, you know, the ship's captain decides we're now going to make purely a piece of entertainment. And that's okay, because I absolutely believe that this medium, you know, covers all things. It's a very powerful medium, and you can use it just to make people laugh, or you can use it to make, you know, a statement. But this film, very simply, is about a Japanese girl who has just gotten married. She goes to Sydney on her honeymoon and decides that she doesn't like this guy anymore, and she doesn't want to spend his life with him, and she feels misguidedly that the Australian Federal Police won't worry about one Japanese woman who decides to set up her own kidnapping. She's wrong about that. Of course, it becomes a big national problem, and the search is on for this kidnapped Japanese bride. At the same time, my character, who is like a cork bobbing on the ocean, who kind of just spending his life doing whatever comes up and going from one thing to the next, meets up with a group of Afghani guys who are going to rob a bank, and he is going to become the getaway driver. Now, when the Japanese girl who's run away from her husband, making him the most celebrated cuckold in the history of Japan's modern media, when she goes to the bank to change some traveller's checks, it's the bank that the Afghani guys are going to rob. But the Afghani guys don't really know how to rob a bank, because they don't know anything about the thing that goes boom when you get up on the thing. So they get up on the thing, boom, one of them gets his neck caught, you know, so they have to run out of the bank now with the police outside, so they need a hostage, so they take her. So they take her into the car, and as we're driving away from the bank, it's decided by the Afghani guys, now we've got to kill this girl, but I don't want that to happen because I've seen she's done nothing wrong, so I get out a gun, bang, kill one of the Afghani guys. So now me and the Japanese girl get into the car that we've robbed the bank with, and we drive off into the sunset, pursued by the police, her husband, and the Afghanis. That's the first 5 minutes of the film.
What about Rough Magic?
That'll take more than 5
In double time.
Well, Rough Magic came out already. It came out already, and it had a huge release, as you saw, and just went into that box office, just did some business. That's another unfortunate kind of situation where what was on the page wasn't necessarily realised. I mean, some of the stuff that was in that script, we didn't even get to shoot because we were running so behind on the schedule and stuff, you know. And somebody said to me recently, who really, really appreciated the film hugely, said to me that, you know, there were so many surreal aspects. And I said, yeah, well, you know, continuous continuity errors one after the other can give the seeming appearance of surrealism.
But there, you
So
talk
the
about steeping
Afghani guy
yourself in
dies?
So the which?
The Afghani guy dies? Or... No, go ahead, sorry.
You talk about steeping yourself in the time period, and
Mhm.
Rough Magic was another one that was also in that 50s
Yeah.
era. Is that one that you can slide into without too much difficulty, the body language and the frame of mind?
Well, we had a certain thing that we were aiming at with that movie, but I'm not necessarily sure we achieved it, you know. But again, you know, take into account that I'm very harshly critical about these things, but I also played that guy as a total sodden drunk, you know, and it's very difficult that when you see a scene cut together that you know through the course of the scene, you know, you've like, you know, it's all fake stuff, but you've like had a beer and 7 tequilas, so at the end of the scene you're doing certain things based on, during the course of that scene, you know, your character has consumed this amount of alcohol. When the director cuts all the drinking out but still has you doing the end result of all that drinking, it's like, excuse me, lady, what's going on?
Russell, did Did you always want to be an actor, and how important or how significant is it for you to make it in Hollywood?
Well, did I always want to be an actor? I knew I was a performer from a really young age. My parents were location caterers for about 5 years when I was a kid, and I was on film and TV sets a lot. And I did my first job on a TV show when I was 6.
What was it?
It's called Spy Force. It was Jack Thompson and Peter Sumner. Peter Sumner's best known in America, or might be best known now after I say this, for a single line of dialogue in the first Star Wars. But in the early 70s, he was a big TV star in Australia. And Jack Thompson, 23 years after I played this orphan kid, I played his son in a movie called The Sum of Us. But he's a huge star in Australia, Jack. He's kind of like, I don't know, a cross between Jack Nicholson and Steve McQueen in terms of Australian mythology and cinema, you know. But yeah, I mean, it just took me a long time. I mean, I started off as a child extra, then I got a line of dialogue and a couple of lines of dialogue, and then I got a like supporting role. And at the same time, I was working in live theatre and musical theatre and stuff. You know, later in my teens when I left school, and I was kind of progressing in the theatre. I was getting larger roles, and I was doing a lot of film auditions, which I was failing at, and not getting any jobs. I mean, it would be romantic if I could say I came second, so many times, but I don't think I even got in the top 50, And then I met a guy, George Ogilvy, when I was like 25, and he decided he wanted me to do a movie. And to me, it was a very interesting process because it was a very calming process, the first film I made, because this is a very suitable medium. If all the things that I was falling short in the theatre and not supplying in TV were perfect for feature film, and I'm very lucky that I happened to meet George at the time that I met him. And there was another part to that question.
How high on your list is it making it in Hollywood?
Well, I don't know, because if I don't make it, then it wasn't important at all. I don't know. It's not what I don't think in those terms. And I know it's hard for some people to see it that way, but it's really got to do for me about how involved I'm allowed to get in the job, and I would say that in a certain way that precludes you from any level of success, and in terms of like Holy Grails and Tom Cruise land and stuff, but that's not my interest. My interest is just being able to get stronger work, and if there is a level of success, for me it's being able to get to the center of what is film art, in this day and age, in American cinema, being able to have conversations like I've had recently with Francis Ford Coppola, being able to talk to Oliver Stone as an equal, being able to talk to the guys who really push the boundaries, and that's what's important to me. It's not a matter of, flying my own plane and, hoopla and carry on. It's just a matter of the job,
So those of us who LA, do you think it still retains some of that kind of magic from 40s and 50s? Is there still...
Los Angeles is whatever you make it to be, mate. It's like it's a formless and shapeless place to a large extent. For every cowboy and bullshit artist that you meet in Los Angeles, the next guy you meet is truly a great artist. So you've also got to take that into account. It's a difficult place to get a handle on as a young person coming from, not so young anymore, but coming from... I'm told I look like Eddie Van Halen. Coming from overseas and coming into this city, it's very hard to see it. There's no heart to the city. There's no town square. I didn't even go to downtown. Actually, the first time I went to downtown was after one of the major earthquakes. I'm a smart guy, right? Jeez, unbelievable. I was thinking I've got to have a look around. Couldn't see any damage. This is the one, not the Martin Luther King one, the one before that. And so I drove downtown, and it kind of just occurred to me that I'd been there in Los Angeles 4 or 5 times, and that was the first time I'd actually gone to the downtown area, to the central business district, It's just a very strange and formless city, this one, and I think you get a whole lot of people arriving in Los Angeles with great ambitions, and then after a while they forget what they were ambitious for, and so that ambition just becomes ambitious to be ambitious, and then they're fearful that their ambition level isn't as much as the next ambitious person. So you have a whole lot of fearful and ambitious people who are not focused on the job, which is performance, and that's a certain craft, and I come from a background of performance, and there's always things to learn, but if you spend your daytime trying to compete with the guys driving a Corvette or something as, you know, what your aim in the business is, then, you know, you're really looking at it the wrong way around, man.
What about the Australian personality, I guess? The films that we get to see here, the word quirky gets used in just about every review. I mean, with these quirky characters.
Zany.
Zany.
Wacky.
Yeah, is that a reflection of the attitudes, or are those just the films that get made?
Well, a young filmmaker in Australia by the name of David Caesar, he's actually made a great film recently called Idiot Box. He put it this way. He said that for the most part, American cinema is about people making movies about who they want to be. And Australian cinema is making movies about who we are, you know. And I don't necessarily 100% agree with that, because the broad range of cinema that's been made and the more independent films that have been made, I think, are reflecting lots of different American stories, you know. But if you look at the main thrust of the studio-driven, big-budget, bang-crash pictures, you know, everybody lives a kind of a heightened lifestyle. There's, you know, reality takes a back seat, you know. I think we've got a pretty unique sense of humour where I come from. You know, the main saying in Australian culture and life is, she'll be right, mate. You know, whatever happens is going to happen, you know. And, you know, I think that leads you to a lot of kind of strange situations. And I think if you're honest about telling those stories, I mean, I'd like the Canadian film industry to take the same attitude, because I reckon they could make some cracker films if they just actually shot themselves the way that things actually go on up there, you know. And I think there's some filmmakers here that are making big inroads into that. You know, I don't know if anybody's seen Boogie Nights yet, but that's a brilliant movie. That's a really cool movie. Probably Burt Reynolds' finest work to date, actually. And that certainly puts Mark Wahlberg beyond his past. You know, he's a very fine actor, Mark.
But for those of us who watched you grow up, you know, through all these press conferences, it's
with the smoke everywhere.
Getting easier for you, Russell. Are you finally coming to terms with the fact that you can't just be an actor? You have to be, you know, you have the celebrity part of it has to come with it, or?
I don't know. I think we've always had nice conversations there, haven't we? You know, yeah, but you know, I don't know. I'm still uncomfortable with that on the same level, but at the same time, we always have a nice chat when we sit down, and, you know, it doesn't worry me. I don't get, you know, angst-ridden about it or anything like that. You know, I have a different attitude towards that than a lot of young performers, you know. But I don't necessarily see that I should put on some kind of, you know, act or whatever. So I'll just sit here, and every now and then I swear and I'll tell you a funny story. But, you know, hopefully, you know, the conversation's as entertaining for you as it is for me.
Quick in the Dead, you were in a particularly grumpy mood.
Was I?
Yeah.
Oh, but that was because I was shooting another film, and I came in like 45 minutes or something. We had 45 minutes to do 10 things, and then I was back to the set. I'd already been to the set and done the makeup and stuff, hadn't I?
Yeah, that was one of those days we were going, wow.
It was like, yeah, but that's a weird situation to put in. I mean, it's like, you know, guys, get yourself together, you know, just like, you know, schedule a day or something so I can do some press and do it properly, you know.
Russell, could you...
Plus, I was playing Sid 6.7, you know, I probably had to go and get beaten up by Denzel again, you know.
One last question. Could you describe your character in LA Confidential?
You don't have any questions today?
No, I did them last week.
Right. Sure? You're okay? Okay, just didn't want to leave you out.
I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, Bud White is a very basic meat and potatoes, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant blue-collar man, you know, who's very much a product of his time and his job, you know, and also his family background. You know, all these things are revealed to one way or another during the course of the movie. And initially I saw Bud as a truly immoral man because he was abusing his power and using his badge for his own means. But then I started to see him differently. You know, I started to see him as somebody in terms of the true sense of the word as being absolutely moral, because he will fight and die for those and what he believes in. And that, I think, is kind of a part, not only my journey, but as performing the character, but it's the journey that the audience goes on the film. You know, you meet a whole lot of people who seem to be one thing, and then as the movie goes on, they're revealed to be, you know, vastly different from what you first imagined them to be.
Does that hangover cure really work if you do it right?
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. Baraka, vitamin B, liquid vitamin B.
It's actually like Alka-Seltzer.
Cool. What was your name again?
Gail. G-A-Y-L.
You signed it Eddie Van Halen?
Yeah.
Sign it Eddie.
Play a little pound cake.
G-A-Y-L.
No E.
No E.
Yeah.
Cool.
Do you live in Australia or do you live here?
Australia.
I worked for several years with Steve Izard.
I
already wrote my story on you last week.
Oh, you did?
Interviews in New York.
All right, so this is...
I should,
I was just having fun.
I didn't ask either, but you didn't say a word.
Cool.
Was I the other day? What?
Just bring the straw.
We did the six interview.
Oh, did you throw him the...
Yeah.
Thanks, man. Good to see you.
All right, mate. Look after yourself.
You too.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Nice talking to you.
Good luck. Good luck. Great job. Really incidentally, you know.
All right, we are back from the Russell Crowe interview, and this was actually once in a while, maybe once every 5 years, I'll ask a question at the.
I think it was a little more often than that.
Okay, once every 4 years. But here's the thing: I was a huge fan and continue to be of downtown Los Angeles. So my question to Russell Crowe actually had a purpose, not just for the purposes of the movie. I really wanted to know what he thought, and he gave, as you know, if you listen, listeners, you said that Los Angeles essentially is a shapeless and a formless place. There is no heart to the city. I just thought that was very interesting what Russell Crowe had to say about our city of angels, Matt.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree with that.
Neither do I.
I like LA.
You like LA?
I don't like the traffic, but I like LA.
Okay.
All right, so let's be honest. Russell Crowe has gotten himself kind of a bad reputation. You know, you hear about him throwing phones at people in bars and stuff like that. We talked about this before the interview. I always found him to be very likable, but of course that was before the pressures of superstardom hit. But I do want to point out a moment that we heard about 2 minutes ago, towards the end of the interview, when he turned to a person at that table who hadn't asked any questions yet, and he gave him an opportunity to ask one. And I thought that showed a real kindness. And it might have actually even been me that he was talking to, because I don't think I opened my mouth on this one. Regardless, this wasn't something that typically happened. So it's worth noting that on top of all the negative stuff that we've heard about, there is this side of him too. And I hope that listening to him talk candidly for the last half hour has given you guys some kind of sense of that.
It was you, man.
Probably. It's certainly possible.
Kidding. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the stars of LA Confidential that was not at this junket is James Cromwell. However, we did talk to him at many other junkets, and he's actually going to be featured in our next episode, which is...
Star Trek First Contact.
There you go. We've got almost the entire Star Trek The Next Generation cast in this episode. So if you're a Star Trek fan, you are not going to want to miss this one.
Well, the good thing is Star Trek First Contact is considered one of the best films from the franchise. That's probably a big, huge reason why you picked this for the next episode, Matt.
Well, it's an even-numbered film.
Oh, right. Which little spoiler alert, which they discuss in the during the episode. You're going to hear in the interview about that theory.
So that'll be our next episode. We do want to do our usual business stuff. The webpage, of course, www.mattandgregpodcast.com. Our Facebook page, facebook.com/mattandgreg. Want to encourage everyone to subscribe to the show. Don't just listen to one episode and disappear. We want you in our community. We've got a lot of good shows coming up. We want to make sure that you get to hear them, so please subscribe.
Okay, so until then, we will see you for the next episode, Star Trek First Contact. A lot of all you Trekkers out there and fans of James Cromwell and Alfred Woodard, all these people, all these wonderful people. Matt, you're going to sign us off with something really cool.
Bye.
We now return you to your regularly scheduled lives.